Hey everybody, today Rahdo talks through episode 14, which unfortunately again is about 2 weeks late because this is for the month of June, and here we are over halfway through July, and I'm only finally now sitting down to talk about stuff. So, apologies for the delay. Let's not hold it off any further, and let's jump right into it right after this. Okay, everybody, so games. I think I've got 9 or 10 or so to talk about right now. And let's start off with Hero Realms, which, oh boy, if you're only just hearing about it now, my apologies. It was actually just finished its hugely successful Kickstarter run. I think it raised about $500,000. And this is effectively a fantasy version of White Wizard Games' mega successful card game, Star Realms, a deck builder. And on the surface, this doesn't really change the core formula of Star Realms. Oh, it's summertime. I don't know if you guys heard that motorcycle driving by. There's going to be a lot more traffic noise in the next few months. But anyway, Hero Realms is a fantasy version of Star Realms, and you may have seen in the past, I actually did a run-through of Cthulhu Realms. And at the time, I said Cthulhu Realms, which is basically the 2.0 evolution of the Star Realms formula, was a much more interesting and deep deck builder experience. Jen and I enjoyed Cthulhu Realms, where we had not particularly found Star Realms very compelling. So I'm really interested to see Darwin Castle and Rob Doherty's next iteration in the Realms series, Hero Realms. I'm not really quite sure what new tweaks are made to the core formula. Like Cthulhu Realms did a lot of really cool enhancements. It will be interesting to see if those make it into Hero Realms, or if Hero Realms is more just like Star Realms but with fantasy. But in spite of that, what really got me super stoked about this was the fact that, well, like Star Realms before, there are cooperative ways you can play this deck builder, so you're going up against bosses instead of just trying to wipe each other out, Magic the Gathering style. I very much appreciate that, and boy, it'd be really nice if there was something like that in Cthulhu Realms. But even more interesting is that they are developing campaign play, which I think is a very, very cool idea. That, Pathfinder the Adventure card game. You will play through multiple adventures with your deck of cards, making them stronger and more powerful over the course of the game. And apparently there'll be several different campaigns, and I gotta say, I really, really love that idea. I mean, not that this is going to be any sort of legacy thing, because of course there won't be any kind of destruction or permanent changes made to the game, but just the notion that every session leads to another session over time, and I mean, you build something that goes beyond just the session you just played is always very, very, very compelling. And the realm system, it just works so nicely. Again, you can see my Cthulhu Realms run through to see how the core game works. So cooperative play plus campaign play in a fantasy setting, which is more compelling to me and Jen than either Cthulhu or Deep Space Armada battles. All of that adds up to make Hero Realms a very, very exciting title. And no surprise, it has such a monumentally successful Kickstarter. But let's move on to the next one, Targi die Erweiterung, which is German for Targi the expansion. This is going to be the first expansion for Targi, which is a phenomenal game. I think, did I list it as my number one best two-player game? I think I did when I just did my top two. Well, I'll be talking more about the top two player later on in this very podcast. But Targi is a phenomenal game, a really, really interesting take on worker placement. Tons and tons of replayability in the base game. But now Andreas Steiger, the designer, and Cosmos are putting out the first expansion that adds new stuff, like a new resource, water, that I don't know what that means. The description just says the tribe now has more flexibility in how it will extend itself. What does that mean? I don't know, but it's probably cool. And there are now apparently there are now women in the tribe. The Tareg, women who give you new targets to shoot for. I mean, I don't really know. There's almost no description at all to what content is in here, but I don't care. Targi itself is so phenomenal. And the only thing standing in the way of me getting this as fast as I possibly can, because we love Targi so much, is whether we're ever going to see an English version of it, because right now, Board Game Geek listed is only being published by Cosmos, which means it'll only be available in German. Now, Z-Man was partnered with Cosmos for Targi, so one can only hope they will go back to Cosmos and put out the expansion for it as well, but they haven't said anything. And in fact, they've been asked and they've said no comment, which is always so delightful. But heck, if Z-Man doesn't step in, hopefully my new best friends in the universe, the saviors of Andor, Thames Cosmos, will step in and get it published, because I really want this. Targi is such a phenomenal game, and adding more new cool stuff to it, I'm beside myself with joy and anticipation for Targi die Erweiterung. Next, we've got another expansion, Rattle Battle Grab the Loot Angry Ocean, which is awesome. It's weird. I don't know why, but it seems like for whatever reason, Rattle Battle Grab the Loot really kind of failed to capture the heart and minds of players when it came out last year, even though it's from uber popular and successful designer Ignacy Trevchik. And it's a game that Jen and I, we really enjoy it quite a bit. I am surprised, month after month after month, it fails to get enough votes for me to cover it. So my viewers don't want to see it, so I'm not going to cover it. But it's not going to stop me from getting this expansion, because the core game is great. And it's interesting, the stuff that comes in this new expansion, well, first of all, there's, I guess, 2 new scenarios. One of them is called Angry Ocean, which apparently is going to make use of all those cool ocean features that came in the original game. The rulebook just says, don't worry, we have plans for expansions with this stuff. So I'm very, very excited about Krakens and all the other really cool stuff that's in the base box, and finally getting able to use those. But what's even cooler than that, the other scenario is called Old Dogs. And I think maybe this particular scenario will go a long way towards addressing at least one complaint that some people have, which is that Rattle Battle Grab the Loot maybe goes on a little bit longer than it should. That's certainly Jen's and my only complaint about the game, is we appreciate the game, we very much enjoy it, but it maybe goes on a couple of rounds just a little too long. This Old Dogs scenario basically starts players with fully tricked out pirate ships just rushing right out to grab as much loot as possible. So I can only assume that means playing the Old Dog scenario will be significantly shorter than the regular scenarios. And that is a good thing, most definitely. I think it's just going to be phenomenal. And I can only assume sooner or later the voters are actually going to ask me to do a run-through for this, so I can show just how awesome this game is. But, whether they never do or not, Jen and I could not be more excited about Rattle Battle Grab the Loot, Angry Ocean, the first, and hopefully a long line of expansions for this wonderful, fun little pirate dice-chucking game. Next up, we've got The Walking Dead No Sanctuary, which I'm very, very, very interested. I mean, if you've listened to my podcast, heck, just in the previous episode, I waxed rhapsodic about The Walking Dead. I absolutely love the TV show to death. I love the comic book. I've been an avid reader of it ever since it started years and years and years ago. And there have been a series of Walking Dead themed board games that have come out. And I think for the most part, from what I've seen of them, none of them seem to really quite grasp what The Walking Dead is all about, because they just seem, kind of like mostly focusing on zombies. And really, the thing is, The Walking Dead is not about the zombies. It's about the people. The zombies are just a backdrop that allows interesting, interpersonal character dynamics to play out in really cool, exciting, and harrowing post-apocalypse survival settings. Now, The Walking Dead No Sanctuary, interestingly, from Cryptozoic Entertainment, who are generally who are known for just kind of slamming out licensed franchise games that are quick money grabs. I'm not sure if they are, because I have to admit I've not really played any of them. That's just what I've been led to believe. So one's always a little bit nervous about a Cryptozoic game. Wait, yes, yeah. But for this one, from everything I've read, well, first of all, it's got a couple of really solid designers behind, the Sadler brothers, who have worked on a bunch of games for Fantasy Flight and seem like they really know what they're doing. But what's more interesting to me in this game is that, yes, while there are zombies and you do have to fight zombies and you do have to scavenge and all the stuff you would expect in a zombie apocalypse style game, the real focus of this game is about the relationships between characters. While you're playing, one player is designated as the leader, and at the beginning of every round, that leader has to make a choice that determines how the entire group is going to function and what they're going to focus on for the entire round. And the thing is, the leader, according to the rules, is not allowed to discuss this. The leader has to step up and make that choice for everybody. And if you've never played it, this reminds me a lot of a really cool game mechanism from Space Hulk Death Angel, where every once in a while you get these event cards that whichever player drew it, it says, you cannot read this to everybody else. You have to make the decision right now that will affect everybody, and then everybody has to deal with the ramifications of that. And that is amazing in Space Hulk Death Angel. It's one of the really, really phenomenal things about it. And I suspect it's going to work really, really well here. In fact, actually, I mean, the interesting thing is once the leader makes that decision that kind of decides the tenor, the direction of what the group is going to do, the individual group members have the option to kind of stick with the plan and work within the plan that their leaders create for them, or they can say, you know what, no, this is what I need to do this turn. You should have realized this. I talked about this last turn, and then you made a decision that kind of hamstrings me. I'm going to have to stick with my original plan anyway, because that's the cards I've got in my hand. And the interesting thing is, if the player kind of breaks ranks to do what they think needs to be done, that actually hits the morale of the leader. And whereas, and so there's this really, really cool idea of the players directly affecting each other, because everybody has this morale thing that affects how well they can function. But, unlike your average co-op game where, okay, before we make our decision, let's just all sit down and let's talk this out and come up with the absolute perfect solution to the problem that'll make sure everything works well, which, don't get me wrong, Jen and I, we love the puzzle-solving elements and cooperative games like that. I really love the idea of Walking Dead No Sanctuary putting players in a situation where, no, you can't talk about this. You have to make this decision right now, knowing how it's going to affect your teammates, but you've got the bigger picture. You can see what this is. I think that's really, really awesome, and I'm super duper excited to try it. My only concern is Jen hates zombies, certainly serious zombies. I mean, she's okay with kind of cartoon zombies, so I don't know if she's going to go for it, but man, the gameplay sounds so cool, so clever, so fresh. I'm really stoked to give Walking Dead No Sanctuary a try. Then we're going to move on to Freedom and Freeze's Fabled Fruit, which I don't really know anything about the gameplay of this game. Apparently it's a card set collection game where players are forest animals trying to collect fruit. And how they do it, I don't really know. There's nothing in the description on Board Game Geek about the actual gameplay. But what it does talk about, which I admit is very, very interesting, is the Fable system. Apparently, this is perhaps the first game in a series of Fable games from designer Freedom and Freeze. And it kind of is being positioned as an alternative to the Legacy style of game. Legacy Pandemic, Legacy Risk, other Legacy games that are coming out are all about creating a campaign-based game where the impact of the choices you make in one scenario are felt for all time in the future as you continue working your way through a campaign. The thing about Legacy is when you make these decisions, they are permanent. They are unchanging. They create a legacy that can never be undone. And that's really cool and really powerful. I've talked about it at great length, how much I absolutely love it. Fable is a system where, hey, you make important decisions that will affect every game. They will ripple on. They will have an impact as you go on. But those changes are not written in stone, because at any time you want, you can stop, wipe the slate clean, and start all over with the game in its kind of virginal state and start building and making different decisions that will make the metagame evolve in a different direction. Now, that's very, very cool. I think that's really, really neat. And in fact, they're not the first to do this. Stonemaier Games, when they released the Viticulture Tuscany expansion, did a similar thing where the Tuscany expansion had, gosh, I remember now, a ton of modules. And as you played that game, based on the certain outcomes, if certain things were achieved or whatnot, certain modules get unlocked. And the next time you play, you would play the base game plus those modules. And so as you played over and over and over again, the game would evolve in a different direction until presumably you eventually unlocked every single module. Now it's interesting that in Tuscany Viticulture, or Viticulture Tuscany, that was kind of thrown in as an afterthought. They just had a whole bunch of modules, a ton of stuff, and they said, hey, here's a cool way to unlock these things through successive multiple plays. It really feels like this notion of an evolving game that, based on the events and the choices you make during play, will go in any number of unexpected ways. That's what this game is all about too, but it's kind of woven into the basis of it. And it's really interesting. I mean, this is from Friedemann Friese. His last game was 504, and I think this is really kind of a continuation of his very bold, pushing the boundaries experimentation in board game design. 504 was the ultimate modular board game where you could create 504 completely different games depending on how you mix and match certain elements. I can only assume Fable Fruit is kind of the same thing, except instead of just choosing a random collection of modules like you did in 504, those modules get layered in over time based on choices and events that happen. I think that's really, really cool. I think 504 is really, really cool. I am very, very interested and excited about Fable Fruit for these reasons. My only worry is, as almost always, Friedemann Friese's two-player focus on games always seems a little lax. They always seem, starting with Power Grid in almost every one of his games, they are going to be better the more players you have at the table, and that was certainly true for 504. I worry the same thing will be true for Fabled Fruit, but fingers crossed, maybe not. Maybe this will be a game that works really, really well with two. But I'm certainly willing to try it out because, if nothing else, I definitely admire Friedemann Friese's just mad scientist approach to really pushing the boundaries of board game design. And that's what Fabled Fruit is all about. Then next up, we've got The Bird Told Me to Do It, which is certainly a very odd title. I don't know if that's going to be the final title or not. I mean, I would think they'd be better off A Little Bird Told Me, or something like that. I mean, I think that's kind of what they're meaning, but it's just kind of a weird translation of, a little bird told me, or a little birdie told me. The Bird Told Me to Do It is interesting for a couple reasons. Most notably, it is from designer Carl Chuduk, who is one of the most clever designers out there. I mean, well, certainly Glory to Rome is a phenomenal design. It stands the test of time. It is a modern classic. It's heartbreaking that nobody can actually get that game anymore. He's revisited that style of game a few times with Uchronia and Motainai, and but he's done a lot of other really interesting games as well, and his designs are always very, very fresh and clever. And The Bird Told Me to Do It looks to continue with that. I mean, his games really tend to focus on combo-tastic card play, where the longer the game goes, the bigger and more rich the playscape gets as you get more and more options based on all the cards you play. What The Bird Told Me to Do It does is it presents you with a tree trunk. That's the first card that's played, and it's got little branches leading off on either side, and the players have hands of cards that represent branches that can potentially grow off of this tree trunk. And players take turns playing these branches on, and expanding this tree till it becomes this big, crazy contraption of branches going in all different kinds of directions, and the branches are all full of birds, different types of birds. And so there's a set collection element. As you play these branches down, you're trying to pay attention to playing the right birds in the right positions to get proper set collection bonuses, kind of like Kodama the Tree Spirits, which I did a run through for earlier. But what's interesting is this game goes a little bit further because every card that you play, not only does it have set collection elements for getting the birds lined up correctly, but the cards also have instructions on them, commands that you as the player have to follow because the birds tell you to do these things. And there's all kinds of different stuff that cause cards to move around or boost the power of other adjacent cards or allow you to score or draw extra cards. So this sounds like a really, really cool notion. Players building this communal tree, trying to keep options open for themselves, having a handful of cards, knowing that, right, if I play this card and subsequently I get to play this card next to it, provided nobody else moves in on that, I'll be able to chain these cards together. And I mean, that's what Carl Chudik does so well, is creating interesting card chain special power mix-ups that ensure every time you play, you get a different, interesting evolution of gameplay. And the bird told me to do it. Looks like it's going to deliver on that as well. And now, let's talk about Minds of Olnak. Although, I'll be honest, I don't really have much to say about this. It is, according to Board Game Geek, a fantasy territory building, area control, variable player power, worker placement game. Which is not really, I mean, that's just kind of a hodgepodge of popular gameplay mechanisms. Who knows how it works? I don't really know. The publisher, Morning Players, certainly hasn't decided to put any information on the Board Game Geek page or tell anybody anything about it. It's from, if I recall correctly, let me double check this. I think it was a couple of first-time designers, so it's not like you have a pedigree there to fall back on. Morning Players, the publisher itself, traditionally, they have done a lot of French translations of other people's games, other publishers' games. But starting last year, they're really starting to try to publish their own line of games. And their first big one out of the gate was, I can't think of it now. I already did a run-through for it. It's on Kickstarter. I think it's still on Kickstarter right now. It's a very, very cool game. It was really clever. Oh, what was it called? Oh, Hope. Hope. This really neat 3D puzzle game. Oh, it's a very, very cool game. See, check my run through for it. But anyway, I thought that was a really cool game, really clever, and interesting design decisions. And mostly, I'm interested in Minds of Olnak for two reasons. One, Hope was really, really cool. The only downside with Hope was that it really, I think, needed more than two players to come to life. I mean, I would almost say it shouldn't even be listed as a two-player compliant game. It's a minimum three-player game. Hopefully, Minds of Olnak won't have that problem. But the fact that Morning Players identified Hope as a really, really cool design, got it out. It's a gorgeous-looking game, too. Basically, I'm kind of going on the pedigree that Morning Players seems like they've got good taste. The games they choose to publish in France that they pick up from other they have really, really good taste. They've chosen a strong spate of games to put out. The other thing that makes this interesting to me, and of course it doesn't really do much good to talk about in a podcast, is, oh my gosh, the box art of this game is so gorgeous. It's a cute cartoony game of some fantasy dwarf guy collecting crystals in an underground cavern with kind of a manic look on his face. Again, it's fairly generic. I don't really have any idea what this game is about at all. But this box art is so amazing. As soon as I saw it, I instantly fell in love with it. And if the whole game looks this good, I want to try it just so I can play a game with this gorgeous, gorgeous art. Again, I don't know what Minds of Olnak is about at all. I'll be honest, this is a fairly shallow recommendation of me. First-time designers, second-time or maybe third-time publishers of their own original titles. But man, this box art, I gotta tell you, it is something else. And hopefully we'll find out some more information. I never understand this. Why do publishers... Why? I mean, I don't know. I guess maybe the argument is they're teasing us, and it's all part of like a multi-pronged plan to develop interest over time. But I don't see how that works at all. Because, you only get one chance to make a first impression. Make a good impression. Well, to be fair, again, they did. This box art is amazing, but all we know about the game is, what is the description? It's super thin. Over 8 semesters, I assume they mean seasons, players have to turn their clan into the most powerful and richest one that claim the right to rule the city. As the chief of the clan, you coordinate your workers and choose wisely where to use them between exploiting the city resources, participating in joint projects, selling resources, and claiming political rights. I don't know. That's fairly generic. Although, joint projects, that actually sounds pretty cool. Although actually thinking about it, that actually makes me worried. Because that was actually a strong feature in Hope, was that players would occasionally have to work together or, synergize, and that's why it worked better with 3. It didn't really work that well with 2. So maybe this won't work well with 2. Maybe I shouldn't have it on the list. But again, then I just look at that cover art and I say, I got to give it a try. But anyway, that is Minds of Olnak. Now, something a little bit more concrete that I know I'm going to love because it's never failed me so far. The Legend of Andor, Von Andor, Dunkelhelden, which is, in English, The Legends of Andor, Dark Heroes. This is going to be the first expansion for The Legends of Andor Last Hope, which I talked about in a previous podcast. It's basically Michael Menzel returning to Andor, and it's interesting. It's a standalone game, I believe, Legend of Andor, The Last Hope, and it basically finishes what he has apparently always envisioned as a trilogy. There was The Legends of Andor, which I have raved about for years now, and we still own and we still love. The Legends of Andor, Northern Journey or something like that, which has been available in German for years now, but finally this year is going to come out in English. Hooray! Thank you, Thames Cosmos. As I mentioned earlier, they are the heroes of the hour. But anyway, so English versions of Andor are Journey to the North is the second one. We're finally getting Journey to North, the second in the trilogy this year. And meanwhile, in Germany, they're going to get the final, The Last Hope, this year. And on top of that, they're going to get an expansion for it, which adds a whole bunch of new heroes to it. So I don't even know if I should list this because, this is a game of interest, but we're not going to get to play this in English till 2017, maybe 2018. Who knows? But I can't wait because I loves me Andor, and so I'm always excited to know there is more coming. Even though, as I said, Michael Menzel says this is it. This is the end of the trilogy, and there will be no more Andor after The Last Hope and Dark Heroes, but still, I'm excited. And then the last game of interest to talk about that's come up over the last month or so is Lorenzo the Magnificent from the amazing design duo of Simone Luciani and Daniele Tassini. These guys have just been on fire ever since Zolkin the Mayan Calendar. And then you've got Voyages of Marco Polo, Grand Austria Hotel, Council of Four, Dungeon Bazaar. These are all phenomenal designs. Really, really rock-solid games. They actually have done a couple other ones I haven't played. Monsters Tower, I have no idea if it's good or not. And Sequadro, I have not even played that one. But what I have played, their stuff has just been phenomenal. And Lorenzo the Magnificent from Cranio Creations is going to be their next joint game design. And again, we don't know anything about it. It's apparently a dice worker placement game like Voyages of Marco Polo, where they did that really, really well. Apparently, players are placing their dice into 4 different rows, which allows them to obtain victory points and move forward on different tracks. The problem is that each worker has a value, and a player must pay a difference fee if the worker's value is lower. Also, players must watch out for other players because if another player's in the same row, it costs even more money. I don't know. That is certainly not the most exciting and evocative game description I've ever heard. Tell me who Lorenzo is and why he's magnificent before you start telling me really, really generic, bog standard, okay, I'm placing dice into a grid, and depending on where other players are placed, things get more expensive for me, much like, say, heck, maybe this is going to be a combination of Dungeon Bazaar and Voyages of Marco Polo. I don't really know. All I know is these guys seem to be able to do no wrong, and so I'm excited for whatever their latest joint design is. And on top of that, Cranio Creations, they make really nice-looking games, so it'll be interesting to see. I'm sure we'll find out more. I'm sure it'll probably be an Essen release, more than likely. It seems like their games always or often are. But that's all we know at this point. My only worry is the last game they put out through Cranio Creations, Dungeon Bazaar, was a phenomenal design, but again, did not really sing with 2. It needed more than 2. So I worry, is that going to happen again with Lorenzo? I don't know, but I'm still very, very excited for Lorenzo the Magnificent. And that's it, folks. Was that 9 games? I'm not sure. But anyway, I think we're done with that. And now, if you wait a second, we'll be right back talking about last month's top 10 topic, 2-player-only games. Hold on. Okay, welcome back. Now let's talk about the most recent top 10, which was 2-player only games. And I think that went fairly well. It was It was not the most satisfying list to do, I have to admit, because there were so many great two-player only games that I wanted to give big shout-outs to. I was surprised. I didn't really expect there to be that many that I have that I love, but it turns out there's a lot. So it was heartbreaking for me to leave Morels or Lost Cities or Tessin, on the sidelines. But, they just didn't quite make the cut. But it's interesting. Probably the single most mentioned, hey, what about, that I got in response to that top 10, which has been up now online for a few weeks, was, where is Patchwork? Patchwork, Patchwork, Patchwork. People just kept wanting to talk about Patchwork. And I'll be honest, Patchwork, I think it does belong on that top 10 list. Here's the problem. I don't have a copy of it. And so it really kind of slipped my mind when I was making the list, in all honesty, because, Jen and I, we do love it. We think it's an absolutely phenomenal game. Great time track slash Tetris puzzle piece game. Really, really delightful, fun, quick, lovely game. The only reason I don't have it is because a friend of mine here in Malta wanted it to be able to play with his girlfriend. And I'm like, okay, I think this will be perfect for you guys. You should definitely give it a go. And now the ironic thing is, since then, they've broken up. I should really go and get my copy back now, but I don't know. It seems kind of a touchy subject, so I'm just going to let it lie. Sooner or later, I'll pick up another copy of it because it's definitely a keeper. There's a hole in my shelf missing that needs to be filled by Patchwork, but honestly, that's the only reason it didn't quite make the top 10. Although, actually, at this point, I haven't played it for over a year, so I should probably go play it again just to be on the safe side. Another one people asked about were the Onirim games. Onirim itself, and Sylveon, and Castellion. What about those games? Well, first of all, they don't truly adhere to the restriction of the list, which is two-player only, since all of those games are, at their heart, they're really solo-only games. But then on top of that, even viewed as two-player only experiences, none of them really quite make the top 10. They're all really good, they're beautiful, they're fun, but that's why they didn't make it. Actually, there were several games that people asked about. Hey, what about XY? Specifically Tash Kalar and Theseus Dark Orbit. Why didn't they make the list? Because I rave about how great they are, and they're two-player only games. And the thing is, they're not. Tash Kalar specifically would have made the top 10. I'm pretty confident it would have, but I dismissed it offhand because it's officially a 2 to 4 player game. And I know there are those who argue that, well, yeah, but really it's a 2-player only game. Come on, let's be honest. I don't care. It's a 2 to 4 player game, so it was dismissed from the list out of hand. Same thing for Theseus Dark Orbit, both of which I think certainly had the shot of making the top 10. Both really, really phenomenal games as when played as 2-player. And I understand both of those, they are less than ideal when played with more, but I've never bothered to play with more. But still, the publishers decide to put that 4-player rating on there, so that is how it went. Let's see what else. Oh, another one that got brought up over and over and over again with good reason. Heck, maybe this one even got mentioned more than Patchwork now that I think about it, was Seven Wonders Duel. And, of course, I've already done a run-through for it. I don't think it's any particular surprise why Seven Wonders Duel would not make this list. Because, that is such a brilliantly designed game that was so heartbreaking. There was just no reason to put all that, hey, I will stomp all over your sandcastle and I'll steal all your money stuff. The original Seven Wonders didn't need that. Seven Wonders Duel didn't need it. So why did they put all that nasty stuff in there? Because it would have probably ranked very, very high. Probably top 2, top 3 category if it wasn't for the fact that there was just all that vicious knife fighting in there. It's a real heartbreaker. Let's see, what else did people talk about? Oh, Hive. A lot of people mentioned that. We do actually own Hive, and it's a nice game, but honestly, it's too abstract. I never really want to play it. I never really find it very, because again, there's no story beyond the story of who wins and who loses and who made the cool move using this particular bug to get that particular bug. There's nothing wrong with abstracts, but they're just, a pure abstract like that is just such a turnoff. It was just not going to make it, no matter how clever and smart the game is. Although, to be honest, it's also an example of a very chess-like game. I mean, you'll notice none of my top 10, if I recall correctly, really had that kind of very move, counter-move chess, which is what so many two-player-only games are. Just a duel facing off against each other with my units trying to take out your units. There was really nothing like that of interest, except, of course, for claustrophobia. But it's interesting, I don't remember if I mentioned this in the video. The odd thing about claustrophobia is, even though it is a very in-your-face game, if I ever do a top 10 direct conflict games that Jen and I enjoy, I mean, that'll definitely be in there. It might be near the top. I have to think about it. But the thing about that is, when Jen and I play it, I always end up playing the Dungeon Master. And I pretty much never play to win. I never do my absolute best to try to ensure that Jen loses at all costs. Because really, when we sit down and play that game, both of us want the heroes to win. Neither of us particularly want the villains to win. So while that game is very, very in your face, I am trying to rip your units apart and defeat you. It's acceptable to us. Well, first, it's acceptable to us because the gameplay itself is so brilliant. The clever, asymmetrical dice usage of that game is just so phenomenal. But then on top of that, the fact that I'm not really playing as Jen's, I'm not playing as myself. I am actually just stepping in, taking on the role of the game system, trying to create a fun adventure for Jen to enjoy. Or actually, Jen gets to have the adventure and I get to watch the adventure, and we both find it very, very compelling. So that kind of helps soften the blow of the very, very in your face, because it's not like either of us feel that when Jen's just ripping through all my little imps, that, oh, my imps, my beautiful imps, you're killing my babies. It doesn't really feel that way because they don't really feel like mine. I'm just kind of making decisions for the evil dungeon. I'm not really the evil dungeon lord myself. It's kind of an odd psychological mindset we get into in playing that game. But let's see. Oh, and I think Jen is just now back. I can hear her. Honey, do you need me to? No, you're in. Okay. Yep, Jen just got back from shopping. Did you get anything good, honey pie?
I got some towels for our African safari bathroom.
Jen got some towels. She's very excited about that. But let's see. That throws me off. What was I just talking about? Right, two-player. Okay. Jen just showed me the towel. So, what was I saying? So anyway, there's a bunch of, people ask what about Twilight Struggle and stuff like that. Of course, I mean, those are just never going to make the list. Let's see, were there any other ones that I wanted to give a call out to? Oh, Carcassonne Castle. No, was Carcassonne Castle on the list? Yeah, it was. It did make the list. Okay, yeah, it's fine. Castle made the list, definitely. Pillars of the Earth Builders Duel, I think, is an absolutely brilliant two-player only game. And it's another game where, you're kind of dueling with each other, but not really. It's from designer Stefan Feld. It's a two-player only, very, very, it's Pillars of the Earth light. It's really, really clever, and the core central conceit of that game is, like all Stefan Feld games, he always takes some interesting gameplay mechanism and wraps the whole game around that, and it's really, really cool and unexpected. This one is actually flipping coins to resolve disputes. It works so nicely. I mean, it came years before the Runebound 3rd edition, Casting Runes, and the interesting thing is, it does it so much better, and it is so much more interesting and compelling. Someday I hope to do a run-through of it, but the interesting thing is, Jen hates that game. That'll be another game that actually makes the top 10 games that Jen and I disagree on, if I ever get around to doing that. But Pillars of the Earth Builders Duel is a wonderfully cleverly designed little two-player only game, and it definitely deserves a shout-out as well. And you know what, folks? I think that's it. I'm going to end right there because now that Jen's back, we can move on to Q&A. So hold on. We'll be right back. Okay, everybody. Jen has now joined us. She is sitting on the couch photoshopping some images she took of some of her glass, which I'm sure will be going on her site shortly.
Yeah.
And I think she's doing that since most of the questions I'm sure will be directed at me, but she'll be more than happy to hop in whenever somebody calls her out. So let's get going with a month's worth of questions. There are a bunch of questions, honey pie.
Oh,
are you
good.
comfy?
I'm totally comfy.
Alrighty, well, let's start out with Tom, who has a couple of questions. You may have already answered this, but how many games a week do you play with Jen? How many are older games versus games for RRT? I would say we probably average about 4 or 5 unique games. We're trying to play a unique, or when I say unique, I don't mean sessions. I'm talking about actual games themselves, because I need to keep up. This year, we're trying to slow down a little bit. I'm trying to get to where I'm only putting out 3 or 4 videos a week instead of 4 or 5, and we'll see how well that plays out. But we probably play 4 or 5 unique games a week, and each one of them, depending on the game, 1 or 2 sessions a pop. So something like that. How many of them are older games versus games for RRT? They are all games for RRT. We never play older games anymore, as I have discussed in the past. What, Honey Pie?
Every so often we get to play an older game.
Very, very rarely.
Well, like, for example, when our friends from England come, we are still working through Pandemic Legacy with them.
Yes, so that is 1 game day out of every 3 or 4 months where we play some Pandemic Legacy, which some would consider not a particularly older game anyway.
Okay.
But, let's see, Tom's other question is a personal one, so we'll get back to that. Because, folks, as I've recently switched to, first we're going to talk only game-related questions, board game, industry-related questions, and then we'll circle back around and do all the Jen and Richard Rahdo personal lifestyle questions. So we'll come back to Tom's other question later and move on to Michael's question about Load, the game. He asks, what are my thoughts about the allegations against the company that produced Load and put it on Kickstarter? Did they contact you about doing a preview? If they didn't, do you think it's because you aren't commissioned like Nick and Lance, or simply because you tend to shy away from miniature games? What precedents does this set for future companies now that they have some success with such lazy game design? Well, Michael, honey, you won't know anything about this, and that's fine. Enjoy your big mouthful of tea you just grabbed. I don't think one grabs a mouthful of tea.
One slurps it, I think.
One slurps a mouthful of tea.
Yeah.
So, my thoughts. Well, first of all, no, they didn't contact me. And I very much doubt it's because of any kind of commission sort of thing. They probably didn't contact me either because they don't know who I am, which is true for a large percentage of board game publishers, actually, or because they do know who I am and they know full well that I wouldn't cover it anyway. Or, I'll be honest, it's possible maybe they did contact me and I looked at it, said, yeah, that's not for me, and said no, as I do to 9 out of every 10 people who contact me. Let me just do a quick search through my email and see if they ever did. I don't think they did. Let's see. Scrolling back. No, I'm not seeing anything. So I'm assuming they either don't know who I am or they know my show well enough to know that it's a total non-starter. Jen and I simply aren't going to enjoy that kind of player versus player, in-your-face, tactical skirmish sort of thing. What do I think about the controversy, the company, all the stuff that swirls around it? Well, I don't know if I want to go too much into it because I made myself a promise a couple of years ago that I was going, it was kind of a New Year's resolution to stop standing between angry internet mobs and game developers because it just makes me miserable. It's like talking to a wall. There's just no dealing with waves of hatred and anger. So best just to pass it on by. But my thoughts are much ado about nothing, mountain out of molehill, and just another internet rage machine gone awry. What's the big complaint that they... I mean, obviously you agree. Let's see, you actually listed the stuff that bothered you personally. They were hiding who they were under NDA, copying sections of the Run and Bones rulebook verbatim, copying character models from Dota, down to names and skills, and you didn't mention, but also I know visuals as well, publicly lashing out at members of BGG and backers who are trying to raise awareness of issues. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that perspective. First of all, the Rum and Bones thing, and what you refer to as lazy game design, I think that's probably the thing I disagree with the most, because here's my perspective of how, and not that I have any inside information at all, not that anybody does, but my guess, based on my knowledge and understanding of games development from having developed games for 20 years, is it probably went something like this. Hey, MOBA games are awesome. We should make a board game version of one. Let's get to work. Yeah, that's great. We love Dota. Let's set out to make Dota the board game. Maybe we'll contact Valve somewhere down the road and they'll give us, but what the heck? I mean, we don't, we love Dota, was it Defense of the Ancients so much, let's make a board game of that. And they start working on it. At some point, while they're working on it, out comes Rum and Bones, and they say, oh my gosh, look at this Rum and Bones thing. It does a great job of capturing the MOBA feel. Let's fix what we don't like about this design, because there's some things we don't like about it, and use that as our basis. We're already working on it. This will be great. Because I do remember, I didn't spend much time looking at it, but I remember looking at one list of the differences between the two games, and while, yes, obviously they're both basically board game versions of Dota or MOBA, or however, or of Defense of the Ancients. So I don't think it's any particular surprise that there are a lot of overlap between the two games, and they clearly took inspiration from Rum and Bones and decided, because they were like, what was it? Your teams are twice as big. There's whole different ways factions work. They added items to it. The function of the way creeps is very, very, there was just, I remember there were like 20 distinct things that, just reading them, from my understanding of what Rum and Bones is, from my understanding of what a MOBA game is, it would make the game feel very different while still having the same basic DNA. And me personally, do I call that lazy game design? No, I do not. There are so many examples of games, both video and board game, that do this. This is the way game design works. You iterate and you take stuff that works well from games and you apply it to your own. You try to improve. Are you personally up in arms that the makers of Battlefield decided to copy the controller layout of Call of Duty? Right? Before Call of Duty on console, there were lots of first-person shooters. They all did controls in a completely different way. Call of Duty came along, unified it, and now we have a standard means for control in any first-person shooter. And if you deviate from that, well, you're making players' lives miserable, quite frankly. Cough, cough, Halo, cough. And so, why aren't people up in arms that Infinity Ward isn't getting royalties for every other first-person shooter that has come out since the original Call of Duty, or actually I think it was Call of Duty 2 on Xbox 360? I don't remember exactly. I'm getting kind of fuzzy now. Of course not, because it's good for players that developers study what other people have done, identify what works well. If they're trying to do a game that is similar, yeah, stand on the shoulder of giants, build on what has come before. I suspect that is the reality of what Load is. I'm basing that predominantly on that bullet list of 20 things. And I remember there was like a counterpart, yeah, but look at this list of 5 things that are the same. It's like, well, yeah, and you know what? There's a lot of deck builders out there that have you draw 5 cards, play them, and then discard them at the end of your turn. And that doesn't make them bad games. That doesn't make those developers lazy. That means those developers have identified, hey, Dominion has a good formula, but there are cool new different things I can do with that. Let's have some fun with it. I suspect that is the reality of what Load, the board game, developers were doing. Yes, Rum and Bones, they cracked the code. They have defined what it means to make a good MOBA-style miniature games. But oh my gosh, look at all these things they didn't do. Let's work on that, and let's try, because what they didn't do is create Dota, the board game, and they still wanted to make, that was their original plan. Again, this is my hypothesis. And there you have it. And then, they freely admitted that, they don't speak English, so they outsourced the manual writing to somebody else. They said, hey, we're taking a lot of our ideas and inspiration from this Rum and Bone game. Here's the rulebook for that. It'll give you an idea of the kind of structure and what works really well. And unbeknownst to them, because they don't speak English, the guy that they hired just basically verbatim copied a lot of sentences, or just changed sentences around. They fixed it. They went and changed it, but by that point, the fury of the crowd could not be satiated. The mob had to have its blood, or what you call backers trying to raise awareness of issues. I call, okay, no, you know what? Jen's looking at me saying, don't do it. I'm not going to do it. I am not going to stand in between a developer and a rage-fueled internet mob, which, again, I apologize if... I apologize to anybody who is on the other side of this. I don't mean to mischaracterize you. I didn't really look at this very... Actually, another thing that really kind of drove me nuts is the sideways tangential backlash that Undead Viking, Lance Meister, got, I thought was way out of line. He very clearly caveated everything up front in his video, did everything by the book, and yet he got so much shade thrown his way. I mean, actually, maybe if anything else, that's what really kind of pisses me off about the whole thing even more. Because I know Lance. Lance is a really good guy. Lance is a really honest person. And the amount of hate thrown his way, I don't know, the whole thing, well, as you can see, clearly that's how I feel about it. I don't know if that answers your question, Michael. And I apologize again if I've mischaracterized you because you are clearly on the other side of this. But no, I think that... I think I'm going to move on to the next question. How's that sound? Okay, Brian has about 50,000 questions. It looks like he has 4 game-related ones and 7 personal-related ones. Are you ready, Honey Pie?
Holy cow.
Yes, Brian, he's keeping us busy.
Okay.
This is one for both of us. What are our opinions of Eurotrash games, i.e. hybrid Euro and Ameritrash style games? Now, honey, I don't know. Do you have a firm concept of the definite or what a Euro game is versus an Ameritrash game?
I believe
we've
that
talked
I do.
about it before.
Yeah, I think I do.
Okay. Well, then, what would your thought be of a game that comes along and melds the best elements of an Ameritrash game and a Euro game to become a Eurotrash game? Or what are more commonly, I think the standard term is hybrid games.
Yeah, because anything with the word trash in it just doesn't sound very nice.
Well, see, that's the thing. I mean, that's a whole nother topic.
I know,
because
it's a badge of honor and all that stuff.
Right. Yeah, but it's...
Okay,
yeah.
so give me a hybrid game.
We don't play them, is the problem.
Well, then how am I supposed to answer the question?
I don't think you can. I'm trying to think of any hybrid game you might have played. When we first started gaming a few years ago, you remember that game that was set in the Grecian Isles called Cyclades, and it had this auction? Nah, you won't remember. We've only played it a couple of times. I'm sorry, Brian. I don't think Jen can answer this.
Okay.
Because she hasn't played any, because the elements of the Ameritrash that work their way into hybrids are still something that we don't particularly enjoy. So even when they're mitigated or softened or smoothed out by sweet, sweet Euro gameplay, it's still something we shy away from. I've got nothing against it. I think it's great. I think a really well done one. It shows that there's a huge audience for it because they do so well. I mean, obviously, Blood Rage is a perfect example of that, but still not for us. Question number 2. This one's for me. Would I ever consider re-looking at a game once I've decided I won't play it? For instance, Arjun the Consortium. He loves it something fierce and would love to hear a take on it, even though we've deemed it too mean, or I've deemed it too mean. Anything's possible. Never say never. I mean, Sean Connery returned to Bond, after all. But I think it's unlikely, and that's really more than anything else a reflection of the sheer amount of volume of stuff I already have to go through. I mean, I have to admit, every time anybody asks me about covering their game, and I say, well, send me the rules, and I'll take a look, I'll be honest, I am, for the most part, looking for any excuse not to cover that game. Anything that makes me get a slight flicker of, I don't know, is pretty much just an instant dismissal. Because I have too many games to cover as it is, and even with my pretty harsh, almost draconian measures I take to try to avoid games Jen and I won't enjoy, I mean, we still do occasionally have a few slip through, and I mean, I don't want to spend any time doing that. So I doubt. I'm sorry. I'm probably never going to cover Argent. I mean, I've looked at it a few times, just not for us, and it's unlikely that. I'll revisit those sorts of things. Honey, here's one for you. What game themes would you like to see more of? What game themes would you like to see less of?
I like gadgets.
That's not a theme. It's okay. By theme, he means setting.
Oh, what kind of setting would I like to see more of? Okay, I guess I would like to see more woman-oriented things.
Ooh, now there's a hot button topic.
Yeah.
Define woman-oriented.
It's hard to... less hacking and slashing and more building and co-creating, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's...
But you love fantasy games.
I do. But there's just so many already to, go out there and conquer and, bring the resources back and score points kind of games out there. I'm just thinking there must be a lot of other types of experiences that we can have that are not quite so,
Right. Although, again, you're talking more about gameplay mechanisms there and less about setting.
Oh.
I mean, do you want to see more games set in the American West? Do you want to see more games set in caveman era? Do you want to see more games set on the surface of Venus?
Let's say what alternative realities, like what would happen if we didn't live in patriarchal societies.
Mm-hmm.
Games that are set that way. Just alternate realities.
What ifs?
What ifs?
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, they said there's an infinite amount of realities that we just happen to be living in this one. So why not explore some different possibilities?
Okay. And what themes do you see too much of?
Oh, I wanted to say one more thing.
Okay.
I read the Con series.
The Con series.
Yeah, let's see. It's just over there. What is it? Oh, it's by Con Ilgudson.
Oh, you're talking about a novel series? A series of novels?
Yeah, Genghis Khan.
Oh, this is the ones you're reading about Genghis Khan, yes.
Yeah, that's weird. I just noticed. Actually, the guy's name is Con Igaldson, and he's Conn, but of course, Genghis Khan is Kahn, but they rhyme.
Okay.
Anyway, so I mean, there was a really interesting point in one of those books where if one of the Khans hadn't died and recalled all of his men to him to make basically a vote for who was going to be the new Khan, we all probably would be Asian. I mean, well, we wouldn't be here, but Europe would have been conquered by the Mongols, and there would have been no England, no Great Britain, no Industrial Revolution, no anything. I mean, they're just so yeah. Think about those kinds of things, and let's expand our imaginations and see what's going on in alternate realities.
Okay.
Okay, that's all I want to say about that.
All right, it's a good one.
Yeah.
And what themes or game settings do you see too much of? That you.
I'm going to have to go back to, conquer this land, get its riches, score your points.
Okay. All righty. There you have it.
No, but you answer it now.
No, he didn't ask me. He asked you.
Oh.
That was directed only to you.
Oh, well.
All right, and then the last one, he didn't direct to either of us, which I assume means both. Scantily clad minis. Do they have a place in modern markets, or are they scaring away potential players? By minis, he means little miniature figures, and he's mostly talking about, like fantasy games or whatnot, where the little miniatures of men are, buff and dressed up in chainmail, and the ladies are dressed in chainmail bikinis.
Yeah, and have bits and pieces about ready to spill out. Well, again, I guess that's an alternate reality thing, isn't it? I would like to see the female figures wearing boots so they can get around in a reasonable manner.
That seems to be the only thing you ever complain about is footwear, to be honest. You never really complain about the bikinis. You only ever claim about the heels and the pumps.
Yeah, no, that's because those are...
Just like you always used to complain about X-Files.
Can't believe
poor Agent Scully was...
tottering around on heels. Anyway, so that would be my number one thing. There's a practicality. I mean, you just can't fight bad guys in heels. It's crazy. But yeah, I guess I wouldn't mind if they weren't quite spilling out of their bodices so much.
But I get the impression you don't mind if they are.
It's part of the female anatomy. Bodies are beautiful. Big, muscular men are beautiful.
Well, let me ask you this. Because his question is, do they have a place in the modern board game market, or are they scaring away potential players? I mean, I remember, obviously this isn't only something that exists in board games. Obviously, it's been around in video games forever. And I remember when we were playing EverQuest.
Were we flaying it?
When we were playing EverQuest. I remember you specifically going out of your way to try to make your female, was it a high elf?
No,
she was blonde. But I mean, you generally chose to try to accentuate her sexiness as much as possible. And I remember asking you.
I would have said that. I would have said I made her attractive. I wouldn't say I made her sexy.
Yeah.
There's a difference between those two things.
Sure. But as I recall, actually, it's all a blur now. But I remember being surprised about it because it was it's been a big brouhaha for years, if not decades, in the video game industry. Yeah, what was it? Oh, it's all a blur now. But I remember you having no particular problem. Like the cover art. Every time you start up EverQuest and you had to wait a minute for the AIM engine to load, there was just a big old picture of a low-cut dress on a high elf girl, and you never had a problem with that. And obviously, there are different societal expectations for what how women dress to be attractive versus how men dress to be attractive. Do you think that societal and certainly we're talking about Western societal expectations. I mean, you walk around just in any city, men don't wear T-shirts that reveal their man cleavage. They just don't.
Well, they don't wear those vests,
whereas women
like a vest
voluntarily do. You know, women have a lot more clothes that show off their shoulders than men do. It's just kind of standard that women show skin where men do not. I'm forgetting about chainmail bikinis, just everyday life, just standard fashion. Is that a reflection of standard fashion norms? This is actually getting way out of games, but bringing it back to games. Is games, which is hyper accentuating, is it just hyper accentuating what is kind of natural human predilection towards fashion anyway?
I am going to say yes.
Yes?
Because if you think back to like the pictures of Cleopatra.
Okay, I will.
I mean, and
all I can think of is Elizabeth Taylor.
Yeah, in that white gown and stuff. But, and actually I would have to Google it to see if there are actual paintings of Egyptians back then. Because, of course, they were carving into sandstone at the time. But, well, you just get the feeling that actually women have always been more scantily clad than men. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's...
Well, first of all,
always been because women
if in fact that's true, is it a bad thing? Are women's rights being oppressed in some way? This is getting, but still, it comes back to games because this is reflected in the game industry.
Yeah. That's a big question.
It is.
It is.
That's Brian with the big questions of the day.
Well, okay, let's go back to an alternate reality. Let's just pretend that 3,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago that societies remained matriarchal instead of patriarchal. Mm-hmm. And what if women had power, and how would they choose to dress themselves as leaders of their society as opposed to men's property? Mm-hmm. I don't think that women would have chosen to be quite so exposing of their bodies if indeed they were more concerned about ruling their land and keeping their societies going and being fair and equal and, raising respectful children and that sort of thing. I think that if the focus of society had been different, women would not be exposing their skin and so prioritizing their attractiveness. Mm-hmm. I think probably we think more about who they are as people and what their character strengths are and that sort of thing over their cleavage size and or if they can totter around in heels. Mm-hmm. How's that?
Okay. And bring that back to games. The original question, is there a place for chainmail bikinis or are they hurting the market because they're scaring away potential customers?
Well, I don't think, they're certainly not scaring away men. So you're asking, are they?
Well, no. I mean, I'm sure there are self-actualized men who take it upon themselves to be offended on the behalf of women, and decide, well, I find this to be offensive. I'm not going to play this game too. Okay,
fair enough. That's a very good point.
Or I don't want my daughters to be exposed to this. I don't want them to think that this is an appropriate. That this is the way they should think about presenting themselves to the world.
Yeah.
Give me Legends of Andor instead, where the women wear sensible footwear.
Yeah.
And sensible clothing all around.
Yeah. I am really of two minds about this. One, in that I don't think we should be ashamed of our sexuality, and I don't think there should be all of the bugaboo about it that there currently is, which is a very, I think, a religious standpoint that we've all sort of internalized. So part of me rebels against just towing the line there. On the other hand, if girls and women weren't having to be so focused on what is attractive, and actually what women think are attractive and what men are thinking are attractive are sometimes two very different things. And we've often talked about how women dress for women a lot of times, rather than what actually men think looks good.
Yep.
So I don't know. I just think with the society we've currently got, God, that's hard. It's a hard one because I'm really of two minds about it.
Well, you could just stop it with saying I'm of two minds and just throw an ellipse on there and we can move on to the next question. ...
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I've given enough information for people to be able to understand.
There you have it.
All right.
Okay, moving. I mean, like I said, Brian also had a bunch of personal questions. I've skipped them entirely. We'll come back because we're moving on to Maria now, who has 2 questions.
Only 2.
Maria would like to know what methods we use to keep the size of our collection from growing, given that we mostly only play new games. How do you choose what to keep, what to part with? Is it a one comes, one goes rule, or do you have a periodic event of cleaning the shelves? God. Let the purge begin!
I think when we move, we are going to have a serious purge.
When we move, yep. Let's see. Well, first of all, I would say I'm really not doing that good a job of keeping the collection from growing because we've just basically, Jen, a couple of months ago, cleared out a whole bunch of pantry space.
In our kitchen.
In our kitchen. She spent a lot of time consolidating a bunch of stuff to make better use of shelves and whatnot to give a whole bunch more space to throw in games that we don't want, that we now have. And so while, I mean, I try to keep what's actually on the shelf as, okay, these are the things we're keeping. And then we've got this pantry full of stuff. That pantry's starting to get full pretty quick. And the problem is, living in Malta, there's nowhere way to get rid of these games. When we lived in England, I was in math trades all the time, and I was selling games all the time. But shipping costs out of Malta are so painful, and there just aren't.
Shipping costs into Malta.
Shipping costs into Malta are even worse. Oh my gosh. Jen had a few choice words for a package she received earlier today.
That cost $33 to send.
Yep.
Crazy.
Oh, she was not being very family friendly at the time she found out how much that cost.
How much that cost me?
As it stands right now, basically, my best chance of moving some of these games is when I go to conventions. And what we do is, for Essen, we pack all our stuff basically in backpacks, carry-ons, and for our check bags, we actually take 2 big, gigantic cardboard boxes and completely stuff them with games and take them to, get rid of them in math trades and auctions and whatnot at the show. And, because then there's no shipping. And we were gonna... And then, those same boxes we use to carry a bunch of games we're getting rid of, we then fill up with all the games we're bringing back. And boy, I would love to say there's a 1-for-1, but there's just not. We are drowning in games. When people come and visit us, I pretty much give games away. So we're definitely, it's a problem. And we don't really have an answer for it right now, other than clearing out more closet space.
Yeah, it's a good problem.
Yes, world's smallest violin playing just for us.
Yeah.
Right, and question 2, how do we track our plays? What are your top 3 most played games ever, even if you don't track them? I used to track plays, but and actually the main reason I did it was to prove to Jen definitively and conclusively once and for all that she cleans my clock more often than she doesn't, because she kept saying, nah, we probably win 50-50. I'm like, no, honey, look, here's stats from 2 years worth of game playing. You can see you clearly win 69% of the time. Or I forget, I think it was 67% or something like that. And and I did a lot of stats analyses and all that. She wasn't quite winning 70% of the time. It was somewhere in the high 60s if I recall correctly. And after I did that, after I'd accumulated enough data to prove it definitively once and for all that she wins more often than not. Although it wasn't quite as much of a blowout as I thought. But still, after we got that data, I stopped. As for the most 3 played games ever, honey, what would you say our most 3 played games ever are? Of course, they're going to be games that were before we started doing Rahdo Runs Through, back when we were normal people and we would play the same game 2 or 3 times a week.
Oh, well, definitely Pandemic in all of its variations is probably our number 1 played game. Yeah. I'm going to say, actually, probably Escape.
Yep. Although that's kind of cheating because it's a 10-minute game.
I know, but we used to binge play that thing.
Yeah. All right.
And then, what did she ask for the top 3?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just scanning our shelves to see if anything leaps out at me.
I'll tell you what it is. You got 2 of the 3 right.
Agricola?
Agricola.
Okay.
Yep. Those would be our three most played
honestly,
games.
We haven't played Agricola.
We haven't played
so
Agricola
long.
for probably a year and a half now, I'd be willing to bet. I'd have to go back and look or think about it because we don't keep track anymore. But we used to play Agricola a lot.
Yeah.
We played Agricola. Back when I was keeping track, I remember, I think we were close to 40 plays of Agricola.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We were somewhere in the 30s. And, of course, we played a few times since then, but not very much. But we used to play it a lot. Remember, we played every weekend.
Yeah, yeah.
Or multiple times a week. And, yeah, like I said, Escape, Curse of the Temple, and, well, that's kind of cheating saying Pandemic across all its variations. I don't know if some people would consider Pandemic Legacy to be Pandemic, but, you do have to put Pandemic Legacy. I mean, I would say we've also played a lot of Shadowrun Crossfire and a lot of Roll Through the Galaxy as well.
Definitely.
Roll for the Galaxy. So that's probably something like that. But I don't have definitive stats anymore.
Let's see here. Matt asks, Alchemist is a truly great parody of academic research. The whole game and rulebook are filled with little jabs and half-truths about academia that are all too real. Although a farce, it truly hits the nail on the head, and the game feels like an enjoyable version of academia. This is something I believe that is lost on many gamers, as they do not have to deal with the insane system that is academic research. So, are there other games that you think the theme carried extra weight for those in the know, for lack of a better term? How many inside jokes can you find in thematic games? That's a good question. Yeah, I think it's you're definitely right. I think I talked about that at length in my run-through for Alchemist, how impressive it was to put all that detail and actually make compelling gameplay out of publishing your findings and hedging your bets in case you weren't really sure you were right, and all of that stuff was really, really brilliantly done. I think it's kind of one of a kind in that regard. Nothing else has really come quite close to it. It's so brilliant. But, I think the more heavily researched a game is, the more it tries to emulate the reality of something. I think you might see, what am I thinking of? I'm looking at my shelf of games right now. Destination Neptune, I think, or actually, heck, any Phil Eklund game. Any game from Phil Eklund. They are all chock full to the brim of incredibly persnickety and minute simulation details that can only truly be appreciated by aficionados of the subject matter. And, I was going to mention Destination Neptune is kind of a more approachable version of that. So I do think there are other games that do it. But for the most part, it's interesting. Most games, we're talking about Euro games here predominantly, are trying to streamline the simulations they're creating to ensure it's just close to the metal. It is, what is it? Alchemist is brilliant for all that stuff they do. It does create a very complex and Byzantine collection of rules you have to remember while you're playing the game. And that's almost kind of counter to the reality of what modern Euro board game design is, where they're trying to simplify rules and trying to ensure there aren't that many little persnickety details you have to remember. But, there are designers to do it. Like Vito Lasarda, I think, is a great example. Every time he makes a board game, it is an incredibly rich and in-depth recreation of whatever it is he's simulating. Kanban, as an example, has so much detail about the particulars of car design and automobile design and manufacturing. I can only assume that half of it flies over the heads of players. But for people who are in that industry, they say, "Wow, it's amazing how." Or Vinos with his attention to detail on wine. So I think there are developers who are doing it, but like I said, it's kind of counter to what makes for a good Euro, because they do get so complex. But I think they're definitely out there. And let's see, and then you have a non-board game related question. So we'll come back to that in a minute, or we'll see how long. But in the meantime, Honey Pie Priscilla. Okay. Oh, no, that one's definitely going to have to come back later. Honey, prepare yourself. Priscilla says, so Richard's talked a bit about his childhood. Now let's hear about Jen's. So prepare yourself. We're coming back to that later. Sneak preview. Ryan says that during a recent podcast, we mentioned that we visited Istanbul. It was an awesome trip, it sounds like. What are the top three? That's places we like to visit. All right, that's coming back later, folks. Sneak peeks for the personal side. But back to games.
Thomas says, what are our opinions of overproduced games? The games that could be simpler and cheaper if they didn't go for the path of custom plastic models and components. For instance, Santorini is a game that could have easily been done with cardboard on a flat map. Santorini, remember that we played this one recently? It was a very abstract city building game. The board itself was kind of on a little pedestal of the mountain because it was recreating Santorini. And then as we were building the city, there were all these little plastic pieces that built up and the blue domes on the top.
Yeah, and you had to do things like that.
And his argument is, and it's quite right, that game could have easily just been cardboard discs stacking on top of each other on a flat board. He found the gameplay to be very interesting and enticing, but the price point for all that fluff made him shy away because all that stuff pushed up the price of that game significantly. Another offender would be Cool Mini, and they're offering Massive Darkness, which is over $100 for what seems like a boilerplate fantasy dungeon crawl.
I don't think Santorini could have been done with cardboard because wasn't it colors?
No. It was all.
You had to stack the colors.
No, I think you're probably mixing up in your head with some other game we played. There was no colors. They were all just. They looked like the cities you see in Santorini.
Right.
They were
white,
all
white,
that
white
kind of
blue.
white, which is the blue domes on top.
Okay.
So no, he's entirely right. And in fact, that game has existed as an abstract game for a long time with just wood cubes.
Yeah.
But so, what are your thoughts? Do you think that should they have made the game more affordable and cut down on the costs, which would have actually made Thomas more inclined to buy it because they basically priced Thomas out of the market.
Yeah. See, this is hard for me because I like gadgets. Mm-hmm. I like something that is memorable and visual that I can hang my hat on, I always say, but and it makes it different from everything else because we have this horrible problem, of having to play so many games that something has to be memorable about the game. Otherwise, there's quite a few games that are similar out there, and they're all good, but they're quite similar, and I can't remember which one is which. But I do remember Santorini because it is the white things with the blue thing on top.
Yep. Yeah. Here's a picture of it. Yep.
Yeah, I do remember it. And actually, once I remembered how that all worked, I remembered how the pieces had to work, and you had, the building and all that. So I think, for me anyway, that game was done the way it should have been done. And Santorini is a beautiful place. We haven't been there yet, but I want to get there. So, I think I do understand what he's saying, but I'm thinking sometimes the experience is worth the extra money.
Yep.
If you like the game enough, and that's why you do run-throughs, so people can see if they'll like it enough to justify the money. That's your...
Yeah, I would be inclined to agree. I mean, there's definitely an arms race on game production these days as, it keeps raising and raising. And you're right. I mean, there's no two ways about it. The prices are getting higher and higher as well. But, I mean, you get what you pay for. I mean, honestly, Massive Darkness, Zombicide, all those games, they have absolutely zero interest in me because I know full well I won't find the gameplay enticing no matter how great the production is. Santorini is a game that, quite frankly, if it had not had that production, I don't think Jen and I would have given it the time of day. I mean, we're not really that into abstract games like that. I mean, heck, if Hive could somehow be designed in such a way. I mean, Hive already does have really nice components with those really lovely clay tiles. But if those tiles could still be the hexes, but somehow look like somehow be shaped in the same way Santorini was shaped, so they're actually real bugs, maybe that would be enticing enough for actually to enjoy it more. In the same way Santorini was, because Santorini, as a pure abstract, is not something we normally would have. I have to admit, when they showed it to me and said, "Hey, would you like to do a run through of it?" It was the components that got me to do it. I knew what the rules were. I'm like, but oh my God, look at that thing. I have to touch it. So we're fans, I guess. Yeah. And honestly, yeah, I mean, it raises the price, but I don't know. I don't think there's anything implicitly wrong with buying fewer games, at a higher cost instead of having to buy every single game that comes out at a lower cost. I mean, again, we can't give actual meaningful evaluation of the relative cost. It's why I never talk about the cost of games in any run-through I do, because you have to bear in mind, I mean, half the games we get for free. Yeah. I get so many free games offered to me, I turn many of them away. I mean, heck, we had a game that's being, the latest Guildhall. Alderac sent that to me out of the blue, and it's being held by Maltese Customs because they want an invoice to prove that I bought it, even though I didn't buy it. And I mean, I don't want Guildhall. I'm inclined just to say, return it to sender, because we have too many games as it is right now. So our experience doing Rahdo runs through is so far removed from the reality of people who are still buying their games. And if I were to rewind a few years before we were doing Rahdo runs through and I was working full time, I mean, I was spending probably $4 or $5 grand a year on board games, and that was ridiculous. And I knew it was ridiculous, but I was making enough money that it didn't matter, and who cares? It was my hobby, it was my passion. Jen and I really enjoyed it a lot. We didn't think twice about it because I was making enough money to do it. Heck, as I've said in the past, it's one of the reasons I started doing Rahdo runs through, because we couldn't afford to be on our current semi-retired status. We wouldn't be able to afford to buy very many board games at all, and I still wanted to get a lot of them. Be careful what you wish for. In our case, you were about to say something, Honey Pie.
Oh, I don't remember.
Oh, sorry. But yeah, I mean, I think I can only guess that I think if I were still buying 100% of my games, if I were just a regular consumer, I would be more inclined to say, oh, no, I still want the really, really high quality, high production stuff, and I'm willing to sacrifice to get it by buying fewer games. I think that would be, I can only guess because I'm not in that situation, but I can only guess that would be my natural predilection. No, I want the coolest, the prettiest, the fanciest, the most lovely, and I'm willing to sacrifice and buy one game for $70 as opposed to 3 games for $25, that are lower production quality. I think I would go for quality over quantity.
Definitely.
Yep. Which is ironic because the way I film Rahdo runs through, I'm the exact opposite. I'm quantity over quality all the way.
But you try and, like you said, sieve out so that the quantity that you're doing is also quality.
Yep. That's very nice of you to say. Let's see here. Looks like another personal question. We'll come back to that. Oh, actually, it's from Ryan. It's the same question as before. He doubled up. He emailed it in addition to... Alrighty. Let's see. Zombie, whose real name apparently is Alex, but his email name is Zombie.
Alex is one of my favorite boy names.
Yes, it is. Alex lives in Portugal, and he's going to jump right to the questions. Any expectations for Portugal's LeiriaCon 2017 about meeking local game designers?
Yeah.
Santiago, Soledad, etc. We're excited.
We're excited.
Yep. We're excited just to go and see the country as well. We've been to Portugal? No.
We have been to Madeira, which is an island that belongs to Portugal, but we have not been to Portugal.
Yeah. We've done a fair bit of Spain, but we've never actually done the mainland of Portugal. Actually, probably more than anything else, I'm looking forward to hanging out with Paulo.
Yeah. I met him at Essen last year.
Yeah, we met him briefly at Essen.
But
gave him a big hug and all that.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. I mean, I've talked to Vita Lasarda a few times, and it'll be nice to hang out. I'm looking forward to getting to play prototypes and all of that. I'm sure it's going to be really, really great, and I'll be filming it all, as you might imagine. Speculate, if you had time to revisit some of your old favorites, your Agricolas, your Pandemics, etc., would your opinion about them improve or degrade in the face of board game designing evolution? In other words, if those games were released today by unknown designers, would they be good enough to stand out?
Well, that's an interesting question. Mm-hmm. I think we've talked about this before with, should there be expansions for, our favorite games, or is there something about it we would change or whatever? And I think with the caveat of what I said earlier about how we've got a lot of similar games that are really good games, but they're quite similar, in that you're conquering some land and you're getting some riches from it and you're scoring points. I think I might be a little pickier now about what kind of games we would keep. Meaning I would say, well, we've already got 3 similar to this. This is nice and stuff, but I think the art's nicer on the others, or I like the scoring system on the others, or whatever it is that makes the other ones stand out a little bit more. And we actually will probably have to do that when we move, is really go through and with a fine-tooth comb. So I would say just because there's a greater volume of games coming out right now, it's likely that the feeling of duplicated games might become an issue. But everything that we've got that we've saved, has already been through many, many, many calls. many, many, many. So I think probably not. There are some games that I think the art isn't as enjoyable or whatever. But I think the ones that we still have that we've kept, we listed like if we played them now or in 10 years.
Okay, so nothing has come along that would kill Agricola for you.
Well, I suppose what was it, Cavemen? Or the alternative game to Agricola?
A Caverna?
Caverna, thank you. If they had retired Agricola and only gave us Caverna, that would kill it for me.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't think you remember Caverna that well. I mean, we both pretty much agreed we preferred Agricola to Caverna after
That's
we played
what I'm saying.
Uh-huh.
If we couldn't have Agricola because they'd replaced it with Caverna.
But it's not that. It's that, I mean, he's acknowledging the fact that we don't revisit a lot of our favorite older games.
Yeah.
Are we remembering them as our favorite older games through nostalgia?
Yeah.
As opposed to, no, they really continue to stand up. They, they are the Citizen Kanes that are just as good as anything that's being made today. Or the fact that, more and more people are making more and more games. They're getting better at it. They're getting more refined. I mean, do these older designs hold up?
Well, I guess we'll have to go back and play a few and answer that question later.
Right. Well, that'd be Jen's speculation.
Maybe we'll do that at Christmas time.
What's that?
Maybe we'll do a 20 days of Christmas thing. Oh, why don't we do that instead of the Advent calendar this year, where we play an old game for the 12 days of Christmas, or whatever the Advent calendar was. How many was that? That was like 20. I can't remember. I'm not a religious person, so I can't tell you what the Advent days are. But you know what I'm saying?
Because it ends on from the 1st to the 24th.
Okay, 24 then. So we could do
you forget, I was still doing full run-throughs throughout the month of December. I mean, the month of December is I'm still drowning from all the games we picked up from Essen and still trying to get through them as fast as possible.
Okay, well,
There's just no time, Captain. I don't have enough power. I can't do it. To my answer to speculation is I think Agricola and Pandemic do still hold up.
Definitely.
Stuff that maybe doesn't. The reality is I probably would have rated them a 7 back then as well. What am I thinking? What's an older game that was one of our first games we got that that we liked and we thought, wow, this is all new and different and fresh.
Well,
Fortuna. Fortuna is a lovely game, and there's definitely so many games, but that's why I rated it a 7. I don't think I'm rating it. I mean, I don't rate that an 8 or a 9. So no, I'm actually pretty. I mean, I am constantly updating my ranking of games, and I'm constantly comparing new games to old games. I mean, you go to games.rahdo.com, and it's. I mean, I don't think that they would tend to fluctuate that much if Agricola were released today by some unknown designer named Ruve Usenberg, and we gave it a try. I think I'd be just as impressed as I am by La Granja, as an example. Honey, how do you feel about influencing the board game industry, mostly Kickstarter, and creating the Rahdo effect, which is similar to the Wheaton effect? Well, first of all, that's very kind of you to say, but the Rahdo effect is nowhere near as impactful as the Wheaton effect. The Wheaton effect gets games sold in Walmart. The Rahdo effect gets games to climb up the hotness and sell a few hundred extra units while the Kickstarter is going, and that's not nothing. In an industry where a game is considered a pretty good success, if it sells 10,000 units, a few hundred extra, that's a big deal. But there's no getting around it. I mean, me, Tom Vassell, Rodney Smith, Shut Up and Sit Down, we all do have a reasonable effect on the bottom line of games, and I take that very seriously. It's why I'm very, very careful. It's why I'm very, very careful to avoid games that I think are crap. And I'm sorry if for people who are out there who are upset with me because I don't put on my investigative journalism hat and seek out the worst of the games out there and play them and suffer through them so that you can be warned about them. I do my research, I read the rules, I see, this is going to be a crappy game, and I just choose not to play it in the first place because I don't want to play it any more than anybody else does. But then on top of that, not only do I not want to play it, and not only do I want to waste Jen's time playing it, I don't want to get in front of a camera and rip a game apart.
No.
And I don't want, because, these aren't just games. There are people behind these games who have put, lots of love and blood and sweat and tears into it, and I just don't want to piss all over that. It's just unthinkable to me to do that. So that's my thoughts on my influence of the board game industry. And and Jen's staring at me like she's got something to say, but
I don't have
she's
anything to
happy to
say.
let the mic go silent.
No, did you want me to say something about it? I mean,
If you have anything to say.
well, I think you do a really good job of making people aware of a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff that goes on with game design. And because nobody's been in your shoes, very few people have done any kind of design work like that. So it is nice that you're bringing a bit more awareness to everybody who enjoys playing games, that actually, they just don't pop out full-fledged after 9 months. There's a lot of work and behind-the-scenes stuff that goes in. So I think that's really good. And I love that you fight the corner and try and keep everybody civilized as much as possible, because we need extra civilization. And
I don't know if I was particularly civil in my earlier rant, which I knew I shouldn't have gone down.
You got my raised eyebrow for that, didn't you?
Yep. I should have bit my tongue. Anyway, though, let's see. Both shows are happily different, but do you watch Rodney Smith's Watch It Played videos and take inspiration from it regarding production values? I'm very impressed. I am blown away by Rodney's attention to detail and his slavishly high, his amazing production values. And I know full well that I would never be able to do something like that. I have zero interest in doing it. The reason I film the way I do, there's two main reasons. One, I think there's kind of an energy and an electricity to the way I film where I am experiencing it at the same time you are. I don't set anything up ahead of time. Every time I draw a card, I don't know what I'm going to see while I'm filming, and I'm actually, as much as possible, playing a game and trying to articulate the thought processes that go into it. I think that gives my show an energy that isn't present, let's say, in pretty much in most other shows, including Rodney's shows. But his presentation is so immaculate, so flawless, it's absolutely amazing. But I know the amount of work that goes into being able to be that immaculate and flawless. I mean, there's a reason Rodney barely gets out a video a week. And he probably works really hard full-time to get that video out every week, because it's so much prep work. So anyway, there's two reasons I film the way I do. One, because I do think I think it's the best way to capture the feel of a game is just by filming it live, filming it raw, not editing anything out. And two, I'm crazy lazy. And I just don't have the patience to do all that extra work. Every time I ever have to edit a video using YouTube's video editor, I just die a little inside. I try to avoid it wherever possible, and I don't think that's likely to change. So I don't take inspiration from Rodney because I'm not trying to do the same thing, but I stand in awe and respect of the man. Let's see, what about other shows? I watch a lot of YouTube videos of board games because it's part and parcel of researching games like crazy. Pretty much I only watch videos of games I haven't already played myself, but that still means I watch a lot of videos. And do any of them have any direct influence or impact on the way I film? No, not really. Not really. I don't think so. I mean, my formula was pretty much set in the very first video I did, and I've just kind of stuck to it. And so I think that's that. And then Zombie, i.e. Alex, has some personal questions too. We'll come back to those. Although, man, it's going to be a long bunch of questions because we're not even halfway through, Honey Pie.
Oh.
We're not halfway through the game questions yet. Right, so John says, love the show! Thanks so much. Do you think there's an alternate universe wherein Rahdo Runs Through is not a board game channel, but a video game streaming channel? What do you think that would look like? And since you kind of pioneered a new type of board game video, do you think there's room for a similar innovation in the video game streamer community? Well, that is actually interesting. I mean, make no mistake about it. When I started doing Rahdo Runs Through, it was because I was definitely influenced by the Let's Play video game streamer community, which at the time didn't really exist. It was only just started up and coming. There were only a few people doing it. And I thought, wow, this is really, really cool. I remember, I was still in the video game industry. I was still working full time. No, I wasn't. That's not true. I had just retired when I started doing it. But I was working full time when these streaming videos, when PewDiePie and similar were starting out. And we in the video game industry were looking and saying, oh my God, look at this. why would anybody go to IGN and watch a review when you could actually just watch the game being played? And then further, why would anybody buy our games when you could just watch the game being played? So, I mean, there were lots of mixed feelings, but I was very, very aware of it because everybody in the industry was, because we could all sense it was a massive sea change in how people consume video game information. And then as soon as I retired from the gaming industry, I said, oh, hey, why isn't anybody doing this for board games? I know, I'll do it. So what if I had not tired of video games? What if I had retired and was still playing video games like crazy? I mean, it could have just easily gone that way if I wasn't sick to death of video games after 20 years of making video games and kind of ruining me for them. I imagine the reality is I'd probably look like a Total Biscuit. I think, I think I would definitely, even Total Biscuit is amazing. That guy, I have nothing but respect for him. Not only because he actually said a lot of nice things about Brink. Thanks, Total Biscuit. You're awesome.
Actually, I had no idea who Total Biscuit is. I just thought you were saying you'd be a Total Biscuit, like you'd be working out and you'd be, buff.
I was unaware that biscuit was slang for buffness.
I don't know. Biscuits are good and lovely, wonderful things.
He's British. I'm not sure. I think he's British. He does video game run-throughs the same way I do board game run-throughs. And he's not Rahdo, he's Total Biscuit.
Okay.
I think I would probably look something like that. It would just be me playing the games. It is interesting, though, because to do it for board games, in video games, they're commenting on the actions, trying to accentuate it by, being scared or laughing or making jokes or whatnot. That's not what I'm doing when I'm running through something. I'm actually trying to articulate, a key crucial component of the board game experience, which is the mental processes you go through, the decisions you have to make. That's what I spend all my time doing, is articulating decisions you have to make, which I know drives some people nuts, but hopefully the majority of people who enjoy my video like it and value that kind of articulation. I don't think that would necessarily be appropriate for video games. I mean, there are strategic choices you make about when you decide to go for A or B, but video game play is so much more instinctual, is so much less cerebral, unless you're talking about, RTSs and stuff like that. What would it be like? What would I be able to do if I were trying to do a Total Biscuit? Well, I come back to Total Biscuit because I do think he is more articulate and intellectual. He does respond, and instinctually, but he actually, I'm not 100% certain if he's actually even recording his dialogue while he's playing, because often he's talking about the design precepts. I think, that's the reality. If Rahdo Runs Through were a video game thing instead, I think the reality is that show, I would really front and center, articulate the fact that, look, I'm a professional video game. Yeah. I've never thought about this before, but I've decided my format for Rahdo Runs Through video games. I think the premise of my show would be trying to recreate for my viewing audience the experience of a video game developer playing video games. And what I'm talking about there is when you work for a video game company and the latest hotness, whatever it might be, comes into the office, everybody stops what they're doing. We all crowd around the monitor, the TV, wherever it is. One person is playing, and we are all just picking it apart from a technical development perspective, talking about how did they do that? How are they pushing that many polys? What kind of shader is that? Those sorts of things. And designers are doing it just as much, drawing comparisons between other games, and I think it would be really kind of focused on the technical aspects. It'd be more like director's commentary on a movie where the director talks a lot about the science of filmmaking. I think that's what I would try to do if I were to do it. Because honestly, whenever I play a video game, that's all I think. I just think about the nuts and bolts of what I'm saying. I don't really enjoy it. I evaluate it and I analyze it, and I would just try to articulate that. I don't know if there'd be any audience for that at all. I am actually a fairly charismatic speaker, and I still would be pretty upbeat and all that, and I'd talk fast. So I think maybe people would enjoy it anyway. But yeah, I don't think I'd be a PewDiePie making funny noises. Or Cartman Bra, I wouldn't be doing that. I think that's probably what it would look like. Second question, you and Jen are pretty well known for not enjoying too much PvP conflict in games. My partner and I are similar in taste. However, I find that in games where conflict is the only method of interaction, we are sometimes able to enjoy ourselves. For instance, we like War of the Ring. But if War of the Ring to incorporate resource management, building unit reduction, destruction of buildings, we would likely enjoy it far less. Do you and Jen have similar delineation for conflict? Yes. Exactly that, yes. We played the heck out of Magic the Gathering back in the day.
Yep.
I mean, we used to play on a tournament level, local tournaments, nothing nationwide or anything like that. And we enjoyed it because, and that is a game where you're actually building stuff up and, you're taking, but I mean, if the game sets you down with, eventually I'll end up talking about this. Whenever I do my top 10 conflict-heavy games, that is the thesis that I will be talking about and reiterating. Every game that we enjoy that has high conflict, as a general rule, is not a game where you spend much time building and creating things. You're given your stuff, like Atlas, Duel of Divinity was a perfect example. You're just, look, here you are, here's your chessboard, go. Now, there are other reasons we don't enjoy conflict anyway. But the number one thing that will turn us off of a game with any kind of conflict is me kicking down Jen's sandcastle. Not that Jen minds her sandcastle being kicked down, because, we're big boys and girls. We can handle it. We don't mind when events driven by the game destroy the stuff we've tried to build. We don't mind our stuff being destroyed. We just don't like destroying each other's stuff. That's the conflict that turns us off more than anything else. Last question. Is there any way to get Jen a mic for the podcast? Right? No, Jen is actually sitting with a mic. Here's the problem.
Hello.
We are sitting on the couch. Visualize if you will, I am lying on the couch facing Jen. So everything as I'm talking, and the computer mount is right in front of me. So everything I'm talking is directed directly towards my microphone that is hung from my chest. Jen has the exact same lavalier mic hung from her chest as well. Jen, however, is not. Jen is sitting perpendicular to me. If I'm facing north, Jen is facing east. Because she's looking at her computer, like I said, doing her Photoshop and whatnot. And whenever a question comes up, she'll start talking. The problem is, Jen doesn't pay attention to where her mic was at all. Earlier in this very podcast, Jen decided to try and look up the author of whatever book, that con book. Yeah. And she was like, I bet you when you were talking, honey, no one could hear a thing you were saying, because you just turned your head around 180 degrees away from your mic and just kept talking.
Yeah, I did.
Like somehow mics are magic.
They are.
No, they're not.
They pick up
Well,
noise.
Actually, they are. Technology is magic. And it has been, actually, the last podcast, a lot of people complained that Jen was really bad. And the problem there was I mistakenly put Jen's lapel mic on her left shoulder. And every time she would talk, she would turn and look at me. And so we put the mic on her right shoulder, so hopefully that's helping. But yes, Jen does have a mic. The fundamental problem is she's just crazy quiet. I keep saying...
The fundamental problem is that you are crazy loud.
I'm talking at a normal volume, I'd like to think.
You're loud.
Yeah, I am pretty loud. The fundamental problem is I'm crazy loud and Jen's crazy normal. Tom Vassell recommended, after last podcast, some piece of software that will automatically go through. I need to look that up. I might want to run that on this. We'll see how it goes. But I am aware it's a problem. Jen does have a microphone. She has her own mic. She's just, one, a lot quieter than me, and two, not very mic savvy.
That sounds like some sort of military term. Oscar Mike savvy.
Oscar Mike savvy. Righty. But you're right. It is a problem, John. We do know. I'm going to work on it. Joseph asks, All right, okay. I don't want to generalize. Oh, this is what I get.
Oh no, is there some generalization going on?
Do you think the format needs to change to attract more gamers? Right, so basically Joseph is talking about there is kind of a standard format, which he calls the dice tower approach. One person standing in front of a shelf of board games, static camera, intros the game, then cuts away to show some of the components and talks about the rules, the mechanisms, then back to that person standing in front of a shelf of games for their opinions. And now it's not really the Tom Vassell approach. That is the Scott Nicholson approach. Scott Nicholson basically created the format that 99% of all board game videos follow to this day. Tom popularized it, but credit where credit is due. Scott Nicholson, the granddaddy of board game videos, is one who basically formalized that structure. Now, but obviously there are people who do different things. I do something different. Shut Up and Shit Down does something different. There's a lot of guys who do interesting stuff, but still, that format is, the dominant one. But with the rise of viewership on YouTube and perhaps increased expectation for polished content, do you think this format needs to change to attract more gamers? Do you think there needs to be a movement towards more dynamic and produced presentation of board games on YouTube, or do you think the current format works just fine? I think it works just fine. Actually, was it Jeremy Salinas, Drakenstrike, just finally, after years of being away, he for a few years was by far, the bellwether, top of the walk guy for highly produced videos. And he was gone because it was just too much work. But now he's back, and he's doing this kind of podcast, live broadcast, 2 people sitting at a desk talking about games with the game in front of them kind of thing. I think that's actually really nice. It feels very slick and professional. And I don't know. I mean, I guess time will tell if that works better than the standard approach. I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with the standard approach. I personally am not the biggest fan of it. I mean, it works fine, but I personally have a hard time getting anything of a feel of the game out of regurgitation of the rules verbalized with moving pieces around, which is kind of what this standard is. I need to see the game played, and more importantly, I need to see, well, basically what I do, I need to see the decisions articulated to really get a feel for the game. And I'd see almost nobody doing that. Although, for the record, I give people permission to copy me left, right, and center. Please do, because I want to see more stuff. I mean, I film the way I do because I think it's the best way to film. And hopefully more people will do it. Although it is a hard way to film, to be honest. I think the standard format is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. And the thing is, it is so relatively easy to do. It is just about the slickest, easiest way to film. The editing is pretty minor. It gives you a lot of hooks to be able to jump in and jump out. And, and for that reason, I think it works well. Probably the biggest problem with it is, the biggest shortcoming is, and it's a shortcoming in my videos too, that 50% of the video does not show a human being on screen. And I think that is kind of a turnoff if you want to talk about a broader, more casual audience. I think tabletop does a much better. One of the reasons tabletop is so much more of a gateway video, the Wheaton effect is so much more powerful than the Vassal effect or the Rahdo effect, is because it's people on screen the entire time talking. At the end of the day, a more casual audience who's maybe just kind of stepping into video game or board games for the first time wants to see less of the game and more of the people playing the game. And, there's no particular reason not to do that, except that's a lot more work. That's a multi-camera setup with a lot of editing, cutting back and forth between the person playing the game and the game being played. Following standard cinematography rules of blocking and all that kind of stuff. That's probably the best thing to do. But the problem is, everybody filming board game run-throughs they're just by themselves, just kind of banging them out while they still have a full-time job. They don't have time to film any other way. So I think it's fine for what it is. Yeah, sure, there's room for improvement. I do think that's probably, and I've never really thought about it for this second, but I do think that's probably the biggest shortcoming of the standard approach is there aren't enough people on screen. It's the biggest shortcoming of my videos as well. Actually, I know the few times that I've done a video where, the majority of the screen is devoted to the game, but then there's a little picture-in-picture up in the corner. I only do it when Jen and I are playing a video together, and so you can see me and Jen interacting while you can still see a clear video view of the game. That is, strictly speaking, by far the best way I should do my videos, I think. I should just film the handheld. I'm filming the handheld and static. Or I should have a camera on me and just put that as a picture-in-picture, and I think people would absolutely love that. But there's no way I'm going to do that, because then that means I have to start editing stuff, and it's going to take hours to put those videos together instead of what I do right now, which is where I just film and upload and I'm done. One and done. So, but I do think the more you can put people on screen, the better. Next up. Tony, or is that it for Joseph? Yes. Honey, you don't watch board game videos, so you have nothing to say about that. Although, no, what would it take to get you to watch a board game video? Considering you don't even watch mine.
Yeah. Scantily clad women wearing heels. That's a joke.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a division of labor thing. I guess you would have to die.
Okay.
So, and I would have to
Step one, I die.
I'd have to
Step
find
two.
a new husband that wouldn't do all the entertainment sourcing that you do for me. And I would want to be nostalgic about all of our lovely times together. So I would want to find somebody else to share that with. So that is the only thing I can think of that would make me do that.
Okay.
Or if somebody really funny was doing videos, I might just enjoy it for the entertainment value. So, like if Blue Man Group
Okay.
did
That
one.
would make for an interesting video.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah, with paint splattering everywhere probably.
Okie doke.
But I think I'd rather you live.
Yes, I shall continue to do so.
Okay, good.
I'm interested about that, though. I would think if I die, you're done with board games.
I enjoy board games.
Yeah? You would try to seek out and continue playing board games if, after an appropriate mourning period has passed, of course.
Yes, I think I would. I would probably find a group that, I fit in
Yeah,
with.
it's really interesting. You like board games more than me. Because if you died, I think I'd be done. And don't be sad or anything. Just don't die. But I play board games primarily playing with you.
I know. But you're not a very social person.
That's true. I'm a very antisocial person.
Yes.
I'm the very definition of antisocial.
Well, and if you weren't in my life, I think I would be looking for some sort of social outlet.
Okay.
And I think board games would be a great way to fulfill that need.
All right. That is very interesting. That was quite eye-opening. Okay. Tony asks, you've published quite a few YouTube videos over the few years. I'm curious, of all your videos, what 5 or 10 have the most YouTube views? Well, Tony, that's easy to find. Just go to youtube.com/Rahdo, or even better, Rahdo.com. I will do that right now, Rahdo.com. And you come to my YouTube front page. Then in the middle of the first page, there's videos, kind of in the middle left. And this is a list of every video I've ever done, sorted by date added. But you can do a little pull down and say most popular, and boom. All the videos I've ever done sorted by views. Honey. No, I was going to ask her to guess what my top 5, but you won't know. Actually, no. Can you guess one of my top viewed? There's one you should be. Well, no. All right. Number
Pandemic.
one. Huh?
Pandemic Legacy.
No. Pandemic Legacy. Let's see. Actually, let me squeeze this a little bit so I can get 5 on a row. There we go. 10, 15. Where is Pandemic Legacy?
Let's see. What was the biggest game?
Pandemic Legacy doesn't even make my top. What is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. My top 30 is not Pandemic Legacy.
Okay, well, what was that first game that you did that started this whole...
Helvetia?
I don't know. Just
first
'cause it's
game I
been
ever
out
did a
the
run-through?
longest, that maybe that would have the
No.
most? Okay. Something Star Trek-y, because there's a bunch of, built-in fans for that?
Nope.
Boy, this is just making me feel totally ignorant. And that people are like, gosh, isn't she paying any attention at all to what he's doing?
No, none at all.
I know.
In case anybody's curious, Jen pays no attention at all. All right. My number 5 of all time at 77,000 is Eldritch Horror. My number 4 of all time, this is the one that if you thought about it, you might have guessed. Jen's Top 10 Part 1. At 80,000 views.
Oh, wow. So my top 28 or whatever it was?
Your top, whatever it was, your top 27. Number 3 is Caverna. Number 2 is Mage Knight. Number 1 is Robinson Crusoe at 120,000.
What's Robinson Crusoe? I don't even remember that.
Well, we haven't played it for years. We only played it a couple times. I did the run through and we got rid of it because neither of us liked it. Well, we both thought it was cool, but it just didn't work for us. My top 10 is at number 9. Is my number 9th most viewed video, whereas your top 10 is my number 4 most viewed video.
Wow.
So what does that tell you? See, my top 10, number 10 is Zolkin, the gear game.
Yeah.
Number 9 is my top 10. Number 8 is Castles of Burgundy. Number 7 is Through the Ages. 6 is Terra Mystica. 5, Eldritch Horror. 4, Gen. 3, Caverna. 2, Mage Knight. 1, Robinson Crusoe. The second part of your top 10, where your actual top 10 were revealed, that looks like that's 2019, 18. That's number 17.
They just had enough of me.
They had enough. They go, I can't. That's 27. That's too many. At number 14 was my top 10 must-have games. Number 12 is Dungeon Pets. Number 11 is Roll for the Galaxy. Number 13 is Alchemist. Number 15 is The Escape, which was the first video you ever appeared in.
Oh.
Yeah. So, but anyway, yeah, that's easy to find. YouTube makes it really easy to dig up stuff like that, stats on videos, even if it's not your channel. Okay. Nick says, what do you like most becoming Rahdo Runs Through? The obvious answer, all right, what do I like most about doing Rahdo Runs Through? The most obvious answer is free-ish games. So other than that, what do you like the most and what do you like the least about, he said becoming Rahdo Runs Through. I think he meant becoming Rahdo or doing Rahdo Runs Through. I have become Rahdo Runs Through, Destroyer of Worlds. What do I like most?
Shall I start calling you Rahdo Runs Through?
What do I like most? I really like playing new games. As much as I complained about, we never get to go back and play our old games, it's really more a complaint on Jen's behalf, because I think she would rather play less new games and go for more old games that we already know and love. She would like to spend more time really drilling down on a given game that she enjoys rather than learning a new game. I mean, we basically have a shallow appreciation of all games. We don't really get to... So, but, I mean, I really do like learning new games and playing new games. I really enjoy that quite a bit. And what do I enjoy the least?
Editing.
Well, what little editing I do. That's why I don't do it. So I don't know if I don't edit enough to call that out. What do I enjoy the least? Well, actually, it is kind of related to that, because what you don't see is, because I film in one take, there are oftentimes I'll do a run through and I'm 10, 15, 20 minutes into it and I realize it's just going terrible and I just got to throw it all away and start over again. That happens a lot. And it's painful. The reality is, chances are, it would probably be less work for me to just edit videos, because I could just stop and continue, and one big catastrophic, I'll just rewind and continue from where I am. But yeah, it'd be a lot easier, I think, if I wasn't filming in one take. But then again, if I started to go down that road, I think my show would lose something. It would lose an energy and an impact and an immediacy. So I don't do it. But I don't think he's talking about that kind of stuff. I mean, I don't know. I mean, people might say, it's really awesome to be recognized as a minor celebrity at conventions, but I think that's... Honestly, Jen and I have joked several times about me trying to develop some kind of disguise, some kind of dark glasses and mustache kind of thing, so people don't recognize me, because as Jen just mentioned, in my heart of hearts, I'm a really kind of quiet, shy, recluse, antisocial person, but I've always got to be on, because everybody wants to come up and say, and don't get me wrong, it's very touching, it's very sweet, and I very much appreciate it, and it's but yeah, I think I would like a bit more anonymity when I go to Essen, in all honesty. Don't get me wrong, I mean, everybody should feel comfortable coming and say hi, and I'll give you a hug and all that stuff. I'd be happy to post for pictures, but yeah, the lack of anonymity is a thing, definitely. Right, and then a personal question, so we'll come back to that one. Red. And another personal question, we'll come back to that one. Alrighty. Now, Phil asks, what is my favorite historical time period, and do you enjoy games set in that period? And then a question for Jen, although you can answer that too if you would like, but a personal question for Jen,
All right.
which I think you'll enjoy answering. But favorite historical time period? Well, my favorite historical time period for games is medieval/Renaissance type stuff. I really do find games set in that setting to be the most compelling. I'm just instantly intrigued by that, because it just works so well for Euros. But it certainly has never really been my favorite. Well, no, I mean, I guess when I was a kid studying history, I did really enjoy reading about the medieval era and feudalism and all of that. I was always fascinated by it. But I was always equally fascinated by ancient Rome and ancient Greece and the differences between them and all that. And I mean, heck, I like the American West. I don't know. I don't think I really have a personal, this is my favorite personal era of history. Do I? Do you? Putting games aside, what's your favorite era of history, Honey Pie?
I think it just changes depending on
whatever you're being exposed to at the moment.
Yeah, whatever book I've read. Like, I really enjoy thinking about what might have happened if the Mongols.
Right, because you just finished reading that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think either of us have a really strong... Neither of us are super history buffs.
Actually, though, one of the things
Oh-ho.
I really like, or what I really like, and maybe you just sit through, the BBC does some absolutely fantastic historical recreation shows, showing how things were in
With what's her name?
the 1600s
Ruth.
or the 1700s or the 1800s or you
What's
know.
the woman who stars in all of them?
I'd have to look her up. She's not right at the tip of my tongue.
Oh.
But anyway, just amazing. To
those
see
are really cool.
How people actually
what the
lived.
day-to-day life was like. Yeah, those
and
are
they
really
actually
awesome.
go and they live there for a month or
Mm-hmm.
a year or whatever it is. So I think it also depends on if we've watched one of those recently.
That's So I think we're kind of fair weather friends in terms of historical time periods.
I do
Though
love...
our favorite one is whichever one we just learned about.
Yeah, I don't know. I do love beautiful dresses, though. If I could have been back in the day where I had to have help getting dressed and could have worn those beautiful skirts that poof out and...
Statistically speaking, you were more likely to be the one helping to put on the dress,
I know,
though.
but I would have gotten really lucky with my birth mother and father.
All right. Let's see. And the other question will come back for the personal Q&A stuff. Let's see. Oh, a whole bunch of personal stuff from Ulf. Then we move on to Kenneth, who has a question about game mechanisms. Often talk about how much you enjoy dice drafting and multi-use cards. There a particular game where you recommend as the ideal representation of each of those gameplay mechanisms? Well, for example, if you had not played a game containing either dice drafting or multi-use cards, what game would you add to collection first? Funny you should ask, Kenneth. You probably hadn't seen it when you sent this email, but recently I did a top 10 gameplay mechanisms, and I used my favorite go-to game to represent each one of those. So go check out that top 10, and you're golden, my friend. Moving on to John. Let's see here. All right, that's right. Game-related questions from John. Do you think you are predisposed to rank things in the way that you do? Or why do you think you're predisposed to rank things in the way that you do? Oh, he's talking about, for people who don't know, if you go to Board Game Geek and look me up, I'm username Rahdo, and you can see a collection of every game I have. Or you can just go to games.rahdo.com and see that same collection. And I have ranked things often point to the 5th, 6th, or 7th, or even 8th decimal point. Let's see. Okay, he's not talking about that. The reason I do that is because that's the only way I can actually create a linear list ranking every single game in my collection. That's why I do that. But he wasn't talking about that. I've always been interested to hear more about your thoughts about why you like to list and rank things as much as you do. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. Why do you think you're predisposed to rank things in the way that you do? I thought you were talking about the raw mechanics of how I rank, not the drive behind it. I don't know. I certainly do like to do it quite a bit, though, and I'm constantly putting Jen on the spot, and she just refuses, because for her, life is a series of shades of gray. What is it, Dob? Oh, Dob saw someone walk by. Thanks for protecting us, Dob. You're a good girl. You're very brave. You have saved us. What is it about me that makes me want to rank things? That is a good question. I think it's probably a reflection of the job I did for 20 years as a video game designer, because in that job, it is a job of nonstop compromise. You're constantly having to make decisions, weighing pros and cons, and deciding something that will potentially cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in implementation and potentially, millions in lost revenues if you make the wrong choice. So my job professionally for 20 years was insanely analytical, doing cost-benefit analyses on everything. And I don't know. I think maybe that kind of rubbed off, and because I don't know that I was necessarily in my early 20s or my teens running around doing top 10s of everything. I don't think that was... I'm going to say it's a reflection of the job I did for 20 years. It just kind of rubbed off on me, and it's just the way I think now, because you are your job in Western culture. Let's see. So I think that answers that. Play frequency of individual games. You mentioned several times that the Rahdo day job, the cult of the new, means you're constantly playing new games and your old favorites are left unplayed. How do you reconcile your propensity to rank things with the fact that you have very few and or infrequent plays of games, each game that you rank? For instance, you rank Agricola as your number 2. Why? When was the last time you played it, and how many times have you played it roughly total? That's a good question. Well, certainly... of the 300 games I have ranked, 300 or 400, probably about 50 of them are from a time before I did Rahdo runs through. So 70 or 80% of the games ranked are ranked off the basis of a small smattering handful of plays. So they all get about the same level of consideration. Those older games, well, you know what? They tend to rise. Agricola, like I said earlier, we played it, gosh, close to 40 times or so. We played a lot of Shipyard, But the reality is, I do tend to think because, well, actually, maybe it's kind of a reflection of that same thing you just asked about. The way my brain works as a result of my professional career for 2 decades of having to be so insanely analytical about implicitly creative endeavors. That was the odd thing. I was not being incredibly analytical about accounting practices or, things that one would normally analyze. I was analytical about creative processes, about the relative merit of art versus design versus technical implementation. And again, I think that 2 decades of training has put me, particularly again with all of it bent towards quickly evaluating, understanding, and deciding on the merits of game design decisions, because that's what I did for 20 years, has put me in a spot where I can very quickly identify, very, very quickly, I mean, nowadays I mostly do it while reading manuals, identify design elements that resonate with me, that I will enjoy, that, push my buttons. And, I have played enough board games before I started doing run through enough to have kind of like a baseline of how games, what kind of legs games have and what legs they don't have, that I can take my natural inherent need to analyze, apply that baseline to it, and the fact that, Jen and I play hundreds of games every year, and we are exposed to such a wide plethora of gameplay experiences. I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm pretty good at identifying very quickly what works for me with a high degree of accuracy, not only for short-term, but for long-term play. And again, that's just going to be a reflection of the job I did for so long, I think. Let's see. Link to that discussion. You've said you partly look forward to Rahdo runs through finishing so you can go back and play all the games you've left behind. Do you think you'll be able to shake that habit of voraciously consuming information on new games and buying and playing them? Well, I'll have to shake that because we won't be able to afford buying them anymore. That'll just be out of necessity. But, I do enjoy researching games. There's no two ways about it. I'm really weird in that I can read a rule book and halfway through the rule book get really excited. Oh my God, that sounds so awesome! That's so exciting! I can read a rule book where I'm reading about the structure of the turn order, and first you do this, then this, and this, and then I turn the page and I read. Oh my God, that's so brilliant! And I could have the same visceral jolt of enjoyment from reading it as I can from actually playing it. And that often happens. Jen can often tell when we sit down, and she can tell when I'm really excited to play a game because of what I've read in the rules, and this is going to be really cool. And then Jen eventually encounters it in the game. She says, oh my God, that's so cool. And I say, I know, isn't it? I think I probably would still consume. I'd probably still spend just as much time on BGG, although maybe I wouldn't because I wouldn't be able to afford to buy games anymore. Well, no, what we identified when we sat down and did our budgeting for early retirement was that I was probably going to be able to buy 1 game a month. So, 10 to 20 games a year, depending on price and, expensive ones versus cheap ones, plus trading away ones I don't have and stuff like that. So,
trading away ones you don't have?
Or, trading away 4 ones, trading away ones we've... So maybe I'd be getting 20 new games a year. I guess that's still warrant enough to do the research. Heck, the yearly games of interest geek lists I do, if you go back and look at the very first one I did, I said right in the header, I am doing this as a research exercise because I'm only going to be able to buy 20 games this year. This is when I first retired, before I knew Rahdo Runs Through was going to be a thing. I'm writing all these ones I'm interested down. I hope people can give me advice about which ones they think I should really do. And, it kind of took on a life of its own from that. So I think I'd still probably be doing that kind of stuff because, I am an acolyte Acolyte, I am a total devotee to Cult of the New. I mean, I regret not being able to go back and revisit stuff as much as anything else just for Jen, because I know she would like to play more of the oldies but goodies. All right. And then a non-game question. So we'll have to come back to that. How long have we been going here? Oh, my goodness. Let's see. Geez, that's a long time. And I don't know, honey. Can we keep going? Are you cool?
I'm cool.
All right, we'll keep going. Question. Hey, that's a duplicate of the last one. I can delete it. Duplicate email, hooray. All right. Honey Pie, question for you. When will you update your top 10?
Oh.
Plus additional also loved.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm trying to think if anybody's bumped any of my top 28 out of the running.
It's been so long since we did it. I
we'd
don't
have to-
believe. I'm sure. What's it?
What's
Roll for the Galaxy. I'm sure pushed its way in, as I don't think it was on the list originally.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'd have to go back and look at what has come out since I did that. Maybe that can be a Christmas special.
Are you sure? You really hated that process. I can't believe you're even opening up the door for doing it again. I thought you were just going to flat out say never. Answer, never.
Well, it was hard the first time because we had to go through every game ever.
Yep, that's what we had to do.
This is just, has anything come up since I made the list that's bumped anything out? That seems more reasonable.
Uh-huh.
And anyway, you helped me with it. So
Yeah.
it's really mostly work.
So because of this one random question, are you offering to do another top 10? The interesting thing is, if I did another top 10, my top 10 wouldn't change much. And people can always see what my top 10 is. They just go to games.rahdo.com. And it really doesn't change that much. It's very rare a game to push its way in. But I think Jen would be much more fair weather.
I feel a little bit sad that apparently my actual top 10 doesn't get as much attention as my
No,
top
that's just
28.
a function of YouTube. I mean, if you just, I mean, it's because it was the second video.
Yeah.
If your top 10 had been the first video and then the also ran had been the second video, your top 10 would have been in the number 4 watched in the second half.
That doesn't make any sense.
It's just the reality of it. Most people,
I understand
mean,
it's the reality.
you can look at the statistics. Most people don't watch past minute 2 or 3. I mean, you just watch the bell curve and it goes, viewership like that. I just did
Yeah.
well, I'm sure people can. So, I mean, that's just a reflection of it. Yeah, your old top 10 was number 10, Dominion, Hawaii, Trajan, Pandemic, Bruges, Amerigo, Solkin, Escape, Agricola, Dungeon Pets.
Dungeon Pets. Yeah. I guess
Actually, I don't know if this would change very much.
sometimes.
I'm sure Roll for the Galaxy would push its way in.
Yeah. I definitely would because I love that game.
Oh, you really love Networks too? But we don't have a final commercial copy. I don't even know if we're going to get one. Well, anyway, though, the question was, when are you going to do it? And I would have thought your answer would have been never. But apparently, Jen, who asked this question, Jen's answer to your question is, drum roll,
I don't know.
she doesn't know. All right, there you go.
Whenever you get a chance to figure out compile a list for me.
All righty. All right, so these are, let's see, that's a... So...
I guess that could be something that the voters vote on. Because you'll have to do the majority of the work on it anyway.
Daniel asks, knowing board game design has to be an incredibly competitive field, how do people start out in the creative side of board game design, like illustrating box art and board design? Am I out of my depth and completely dreaming?
Is he out of his depth? I'd like to get out of...
The depth. All right, so what was the... getting on the table... sorry. I have absolutely no notion to design a board game. Not smart enough. I am feeling a calling for board game... Oh, he's interested in board game graphic design and illustration.
Yeah.
So how do people start out in the creative side of board game graphic design, like illustrating box art and board design? I'm very out of my depth and completely dreaming. I've attached a few of my favorite illustrations to... Oh, wow. Sorry, folks, you don't get to see Daniel's art. Oh, that's very nice, Daniel.
Can I see?
Let's see.
And I'm sitting on the same couch as you are, so...
So, or no, did you actually do these, or are these just things you like? Please check out. I would say probably, Daniel, your best bet would be to go to, there is a forum on Board Game Geek called Game Design or Game Designers. And it's a forum devoted to independent individuals who have decided, I want to design a game. And they're on there. There's thousands of them on there talking about game design. If you went on there and said, hi, I would like to help you with your game design by making art, you would probably get a lot of takers immediately who would love to have their game looks like something other than stick figures. So I would suggest starting out with that. Get get yourself listed as an artist in the Board Game Geek database because you were the artist on game prototype X, Y, or Z, or print and play game X, Y, or Z. Start doing that. Next thing you know, you got a portfolio that could maybe take you to getting noticed by actual publishers. Who knows? I would say start something like that would probably be a good way to go. Let's see. Why is it that the vast majority of board games readily available in Target and Walmart are still mostly really crappy? What is day-to-day board gaming like in Germany and other parts of game-heavy Europe? We don't live there, so I don't know for sure, but I do know that, first of all, that's changing for your Walmarts and your, what's that really popular, Borders bookstore, I think? Is it Borders, or are they the ones who went out of business? But, you're seeing more and more good gamer-style, modern designer board games showing up. And a big part of that is Will Wheaton. The Wheaton effect is making them appear. I think given time, the Drek is going to disappear and it's going to be replaced with all good stuff. We just need to focus on creating more good versions of things that can one-for-one swap out. Where's the gamer? Actually, no, that's not true. There are gamer versions of Clue and Sorry and whatnot. They just need to, make their way in. Not that there's anything wrong with those old classics anyway. People love them for a reason. They've stuck around for a reason. They do what they do very well. But as far as Germany, I know it's just much further ahead. I liken it to Japan. In Japan, if you ride on the subway, some Americans specifically, might be surprised to see grown businessmen and women reading comic books. Because comic books are a regular day of life thing that are not relegated to the geeks and the children. All walks of life enjoy comic books in Japan. And I would say board games in Germany are much closer to that than they are to being relegated as children's entertainment like they are in America. You just got to give it time, and we'll get there, I think. Let's see. Honey Pie, Daniel also asks... as Rahdo fans love your gateway story of pandemic in the camper van on the trip to France, what were your next 5 to 10 games that you really reinforced the spark? What were the games we played shortly thereafter? Well, after we got back, the first thing I started looking for was more cooperative games. It was mostly co-op games. And I actively avoided any sort of competitive games because I knew right off the bat we weren't interested in competing with each other or shooting. I just knew that instinctually and intuitively. It was just not interesting. So I wanted more cooperative games, but at that point there were not near as many cooperative games as there are right now. And but we got, what were they? Oh my gosh, that's a good question. I'd have to go back and look. But nothing really stoked the fires quite. We tried Lord of the Rings, the cooperative game. I actually thought it was really awesome, but Jen didn't like it. We ultimately did try Red November, which was the game that I almost got, and it just didn't work well at all for two. It's a terrible two-player game, but I think it'd be better with more. We got Island of Dr. Necro. That was actually a pretty good game. We still have it. Still like that one. It's a bit Ameritrashy, but, still like it. It's a good 7 out of 10. But, it's interesting. Because like I said, at this... I tried... Forgotten Island, which was a big flop with us. I was so confident Forgotten Island was going to be great. It's from the same designer. But, we just didn't like it at all. It was so light. It's a game for kids. Or for families, I should say. And really, nothing really worked until I said, okay, let me give up on this cooperative. Because, again, the landscape for cooperative games back then was not the same as it is now. So eventually I did say, well, what should I try? And I asked around. I still had lots of I was still talking not so much with people on Board Game Geek, more I was talking with people in the video game industry who I knew who played board games, and I was asking for recommendations. And I know very, very early on, Dominion and Agricola. It was probably those two that cemented it, quite frankly, because I tried both of them back to back, and those really knocked it out of the park for us, and they kind of gave us a base for other things to look for. So I don't know that I have the next 5 or 10, but I know the next 2 that really helped grab us hook, line, and sinker were definitely Agricola and Dominion. Back in whatever that was. Was that 2009? Yeah, I think that was in 2009. And early 2010. As couple gamers, is there a good way to keep the play fun while encouraging your... Oh, yeah, AP. Is a good way to keep the play fun while encouraging your AP partner who is new to gaming while keeping it light and fun. Any advice on how to find the best games to introduce new players to? There's lots of really good lists for Gateway. Heck, I've made a Gateway game top 10 list. So Board Game Geek, you should go to the suggestion forum in Board Game Geek. Say, look, this is my situation. This is the person I'm going to be talking to. Post, and you will get hundreds of suggestions. And then you can just start doing research. Is there a good way to keep the play fun while encouraging your AP partner who is new to gaming to keep it light and fun? While keeping it light and fun. Right.
I think it's try to get games that are not AP prone.
Well, yeah, stay away from AP prone games. Although you can AP out on pretty much almost any game. What is a good way to help you ensure you are not going to be AP prone in a game? Because you're AP prone. I'm a little bit. You're a lot.
Yeah. I think it just has to be the game. If a game needs grinding, it needs grinding.
Well, the thing is, if your wife is a good sport and is starting to join you at the table, but is a bit AP prone, you know what? If she's having fun, don't worry about it. Just sit and smile and wait. That's certainly what I did. I actually, we tried egg timers, and that just ruined it for Jen.
Yeah.
She hated it.
I hate
she
that.
hated the pressure. And the thing is, when Jen's APing, that's when she's having fun. When she's thinking about all these things and trying to weigh, and balance all these decisions she has to make, that's what she enjoys. So, I wouldn't want her to have to rush through that because then she wouldn't be enjoying the game. If your wife is enjoying it while being AP prone, count your blessings.
Yeah.
At this point, in all honesty, I do often keep my laptop when Jen's going on a particularly long, like 5+ minutes, then I'll just go on ahead and browse BGG or something like that. But I
would say he starts looking at his laptop after a minute.
Yeah, yeah, after a minute. But yeah, we tried, and ultimately, I never found a good solution, and so I just learned to live with Jen's AP. Let's see. What games could you introduce to ease into something like Agricola without someone running away from the table? Well, Agricola, all creatures big and small, I suppose. Is all creatures big and small? Yeah. Again, that's the kind of question you go to the recommendations forum on Board Game Geek, and you ask that, and people will give you a lot of good suggestions. Or heck, you can go to the Rahdo Guild, rahdo.guild.com. If you're particularly looking for the perspective of fans of my show, Board Game Geek is such an amazing research tool. There was, like I said, when I first started out, I was mostly relying on people I knew in the video game industry, but I very quickly realized they were fairly limited. They hadn't played very many games either. And there was this database, Board Game Geek, that had everything. And so once I found a game I liked, I would just say, okay, what are the mechanisms in this? Worker placement. Okay, that's interesting. Click on that. Oh my gosh, here's 10,000 worker placement games. All right, well, what do? I guess I'll sort them by ranking. And I just started looking at the top ones, and I found a lot of games we loved. And over time, I just got better and better at evaluating and starting to read rules before I bought them. It took me a while before I eventually did that, but that's a good thing to do. But yeah, Board Game Geek is an incredible tool. And you can go back, you can do a search for 2010, and you'll start seeing me, just some schlub who had gotten on Board Game Geek. I started posting lots of, hey, my wife really likes this, and I really like that, and getting a lot of recommendations from people. And some of them didn't pan out, a lot of them did, and I learned how to identify games that we would enjoy. Let's see here. Moving on to Justin. My games collection is missing treasure hunting game. Could you recommend a few? Tobago.
I love Tobago. Especially if you make the
I can't think of any other game we have where you actually hunt for treasure.
Well, what about the sands? The desert sands?
I was just going to say Forbidden Desert and Tobago.
You're hunting for treasure.
Forbidden Desert and Tobago. There's probably a few others, but that's actually, I'll be honest, that's not...
We played something recently where you got loot.
Yeah, but that's not treasure hunting necessarily, getting loot.
Well, it kind of is. Kind of is.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I don't know. Tobago and Forbidden Desert. And beyond that, I would refer to my previous question. Go to Board Game Geek. Go to the recommendations forum. Type in treasure hunting, and you'll get a bajillion suggestions about games that are themed around treasure hunting. Relic Runners was really good, but it wasn't very good for 2. But it was a really solid game. So that's another one you might consider. Alrighty. Question. First of all, interesting about... Oh, wait, is there a question mark in here? Nope. All right. Question for Jen. Are there any games in the collection that you want to play more than me? Any games that I've traded away that you're disappointed about?
Oh, I can't possibly remember whatever he's traded away.
That's the problem. I mean, you just have to understand, Jen, she forgets about games 10 minutes after we played them because she just goes back to her life. She doesn't do the studying because she relies on me 100% to do it all.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I forget them, but that's why something has to have some sort of memorable something about it for me to remember.
Yeah, and chances are, if I got rid of it...
I would never be able to remember.
Let's see. So she won't remember. Jen has a higher tolerance for aggressive player versus player conflict than I do. So she really loved Tigris and Euphrates. Loved that one a lot. But she was fine because I didn't like it at all, so we got rid of it. That's one that I remember. This is something that I would have to think long and hard about. And Jen, I mean, it'd be impossible for Jen to do. I could probably do it. But, I mean, heck, that is why it's in my top 10 list of potential topics. It's been voted down every time it's ever come up, but maybe sometime it'll make it. So, we don't have a good answer for you, Christian, but perhaps the next one. Let's see here.
The top 10 disagreements about games we've had?
Yeah, top 10 games we disagreed on the most. You know, ones that I loved, you hated, or vice versa. I mean, for me, it's going to be, there's a lot of games I love that you just dismiss out of hand because they put a machine gun in your hand, that kind of thing. Or because they're really, really deep and dark and heavy subject matter, and you would just rather have light topics. You would rather not have hard-hitting, weighty and meaty themes that make you, it's weird that you don't like those because you have no problem reading books about it.
Yeah, I know.
But, yeah, you just don't like it in your gaming.
I guess I like to be one step removed. Mm-hmm. I don't want to have it happen to me. I don't mind learning about it.
Yeah. By the way, folks, the reason Jen is now significantly quieter is because she has put her computer away. And so now she's reclined even more into like a nap-like state. You've dropped like 3 or 4 decibels from what you were talking earlier.
Sorry.
Like, yeah, well, there's kind of an episode because I'm really relaxed and it's really hot.
Well, we've been talking for a couple of hours. I'm hoping we get a potty break sometime soon.
We're almost through
the
game-related stuff. All right, this is a crazy long question, Christian. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry, Christian. All right. Okay. My question for you is, what is Rahdo run-through policy about getting involved with production while also being a reviewer? You've stayed away from any direct connection with publishers, it seems, or have been careful to disclose when you might have some conflict of interest, like the Fabled video game or And Then We Held Hands. I'd like to see that kind of disclosure become the norm, but it seems board gaming continues to grow. There's big potential for this concern to be shrugged away and abused. If you're going to Gen Con, I'd be curious to get your assessment. Right, so I mean, basically, Christian had a lot of specific observations about, Tom Vassell is, he's involved in the production of video games, and Lance Meister, Undead Viking, he just got hired by Tasty Minstrel Games, and there's the potential for overlap between the industry and those who are tasked with reviewing the industry. Is it a good thing or bad thing? And I'm kind of obviously, I'm especially odd because I'm one of the few who don't take money for my videos. I mean, I shouldn't say that. There's plenty who don't take money for videos. That's a misspeak. But what is my policy about getting involved with production while also being a reviewer? Well, the interesting thing is, let's kind of circle back around to something that Jen opined on or observed earlier. I'm really antisocial. So if I go to Gen Con, I don't find, if Tom Vassell, who is a very gregarious, outgoing people person, I've met him. I've spent quite a bit of time talking to him. Same for Lance Meister. These guys seek out social opportunities to mingle and have fun and chat and get to know people and make friends and all of that. I'm a weirdo. I actually shy away from the spotlight. I shy away from social encounters. I'm fine. I like people, and I consider I've got friends and whatnot, but it's just generally something I don't seek out in day-to-day life. So it's very, very easy for me, because of my natural predilections, to have this kind of built-in firewall. Like, concrete example, Stephen Bonacore of Stronghold Games. He's always saying, Rich, we should go out and have a beer sometime. I never actually do, and it's not necessarily because I'm trying to maintain a level of professional distance between myself, the reviewer, and Stephen Bonacore, the publisher, because of compromises to my reviewer integrity. It's not that. It's just that I don't particularly, at the end of the day, want to go out and have a beer with anybody. That's not a reflection on Stephen Bonacore or anyone. I would just like to go back and hang out on the internet. One big thing that I've always had a personal problem with, I think one of the things that really kind of pushes me away from social situations is I've got this really weird hearing thing where as soon as there's 3 people in a room, I physically cannot understand what anybody is saying. Everything just instantly becomes white noise to me at a party or at a crowded bar, or heck, even a mostly empty bar. I literally cannot understand what anyone is saying. And I just nod and smile and just give non-committal, oh, that's kind of interesting, and just go off of body language. Because, my hearing is fine. I just cannot pick out individual voices. I have no way to zero in, which seems to be something that other people can do no problem. So that kind of just inherently makes me stay away from social situations, or certainly group situations. I'm much more comfortable just one-on-one with people. But one-on-one in a quiet place where I can actually hear them. So, I'm sure Stephen Bonacore is a great guy, and I would love to hear stories about how he switched from, I think he's a lawyer, if I recall correctly, and he still does that as a day job and runs Stronghold, one of the bigger game publishing things, as nighttime. I would love to hear about that. I'm sure he's got lots of really great stories and the early days of starting out and switching. That'd be amazing. So I'd love to sit around and chat with him, but not at a bar at the end of the day nursing a beer, because I just won't understand a thing he's saying. So that implicit shortcoming of mine kind of keeps me separated from the rest of the industry, where other people would just get kind of more hooked in, for lack of a better term. To the underlying question of, is it a good or a bad thing? I don't know. The reality is, we're not curing cancer here. This is not War and Peace. This is not Brexit. These are just games. And yeah, sure, they cost a fair bit of money, but it is still just an idle fancy. There's nothing really weighty or, important about, board games are not newsworthy. I'm just not worried about it. Potential issues of collusion between, just the other day, Warner Brothers got fined heavily by the FTC because it was revealed that they were buying off video game reviews. And that's like the worst kept secret in the video game industry going back decades. It's always been well known that happens. But I'll be honest, it's never really bothered me very much, because they're just games. Caveat emptor, buyer beware, do your own research. As I always say, please, 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 ignore my personal subjective opinion about the games. Watch the run-through and decide for yourself what it is. Now, the tricky thing is, I'm one of the very few people who I think produces a video format that would actually allow you to draw your own conclusions. Most of them where people are just kind of reiterating or reciting what the rules are and just kind of putting their own spin on it. I don't know that you can get enough information out of that. You do have to rely on personal opinion. And I don't know, you just have to decide who you want to trust and who you don't. But, the reality is, if you're not comfortable with it, find a way to play the game first. Or read the rules for yourself and do enough research to where you're fairly confident. Much more important than paying attention to my personal opinion or Tom Vassel's personal opinion or shut up and sit down personal opinion. All of our opinions are meaningless. Much better is to go to Board Game Geek, find the game that you're curious about, and up at the top, there's a link you can hit called comments. And for any game that's been out for a month or two, you'll see 50 to 5,000 to 500 people commenting on what their opinions are. Go with the wisdom of the crowd. Read through a few pages of that. Read through a few pages of the people who are rating it highly, a 9 or a 10. Read through a few pages of the people who are rating it a 3 or a 2 or a 1, and then read through a couple of pages who are right in the middle. Take all of that as a gestalt, mix it up. That's going to give you a better idea of the pros and the cons of that game than watching 1,000 YouTube videos. And so, when you have that kind of tool available to you, and it doesn't cost you a dime, I have a hard time getting worried about journalistic ethics in the board game industry. Whether there's collusion or not, it's kind of immaterial because there's so much out there for you to be able to do the research yourself. And you know what? The reality is, if there is a reviewer out there who is so blatantly corrupt as to completely cash in and say nothing but nice stuff about Drek, that's going to come to light pretty gosh darn quick. And he's not going to, or he or she is not going to have a viewership. The reality is, I believe the majority of people who decide to take the time to pick up a camera and record their thoughts and share it with everybody else are being honest and genuine. And that's because it's my default inherent perception of humanity as an overwhelming whole that people are good and people are honest. And that includes board game reviewers, just like it includes politicians, and it includes all walks of life. So I tend not to worry about it too much. Sorry, that was kind of a rambling answer. I don't know if that really gives you what you were looking for, Christian, but there you go. Why exactly did you retire from... Oh, that's going to be a personal question. Alrighty. So, honey, we're almost done with games. Almost done. Alrighty. And then, questions about other game reviewers.
Okay, I'm going to have nothing to say about that.
No, you aren't. Let's see. Hold on a second. Let me just look at the last few to see if there are any. That's, nope. And, oh dear. Nope. Okay, so none of these last... Oh, wait. Oh, no. This last one. All right, this is from Alex. There will be 6 years. This will be Alex's 6th year going to PAX, Penny Arcade Expo in Seattle. Yay! I'm feeling a little more adventurous when it comes to finding places to... this is about Seattle. All right, so no, honey, there are no more game questions.
Okay, then I will sign off for now, and I'll be back for the
Q&A, the personal Q&A. All righty. So, just put it on the couch. Okay. Jen doesn't know what to do with her mic. Thump, 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 thump. I don't know if Jen just made a lot of noise there. My husband and I love the podcast and the videos. Keep up the great work. You briefly mentioned Will Wheaton in Tabletop in your June podcast. Do you like and watch Tabletop? I watch and love Tabletop. I think Tabletop is awesome. I find it very entertaining. I think Will Wheaton does a great job, and he's a great ambassador for the hobby. Do you feel overall that Tabletop Dice Tower Watch It Played Rahdo is aimed to help bring people into board gaming, or are you, the board game reviewer generally, just pandering to the geeky board game base? Do you think any reviewer may be more successful than others at drawing in new gamers? Yes. I think myself and Tom and the vast majority of board game video content makers are really just making content for board game geeks. Of course, there's going to be exceptions. There's going to be outliers, but for the most part, the formats we play are too focused on the game and not enough on the experience. And for a total newbie to be swayed over to actually joining in and saying, hey, you know what, this looks like fun. I think I want to give this a try. It can't be about the game. It has to be about the experience they're going to have. Now, like I said earlier, I think my videos are about the experience, but they are very, very geeky. They assume an understanding of what the game experience is like, and you're looking for more. Will Wheaton and Tabletop, though, those videos are all about the experience. They are very little about the game. They kind of just brush over the game. In fact, I think they almost spend too much time up front talking about the rules. They get through it as fast as possible, but they get to the experience They purposely go out of their way to try to choose charismatic people who are entertaining and implicitly fun to watch, and then they show them doing this thing, and because it looks like they're having fun, people are more inclined to try it out. When Tom Vassell does a video, or when I do a video, or when Undead Viking does a video, or when Board Game Brawl does a video, or the vast majority of video game reviewers do a video, it doesn't look like we're necessarily having fun. It looks like we're reporting on a game. It's implicitly dry. Now, so I think tabletop is great. Another one would be Shut Up and Sit Down. I think those guys are phenomenal. And even while I often vehemently disagree with the conclusions they come up with, and I would happily argue with them that they get it wrong until they're blue in the face, it doesn't change the fact that they are creating very entertaining videos. I don't know how well they work as broad entertainment. I mean, obviously a lot of the humor in them does require board game knowledge. But I think they have a better shot than most at actually trying to draw people in. But the important thing is when they talk about the game, they are very, very evocative in talking, again, not about the mechanisms. They really just kind of brush over the mechanisms and spend most of the time talking about the experience that those mechanisms generate. And they're professional video game reviewers. They've done this for a long time. They're professional journalists, and I think it shows when they talk about stuff as opposed to when amateurs, like most of us, talk about it. They can really draw you in with a narrative that speaks to you not as a gamer, but as a person seeking to be entertained. So I think they're a potentially very good source as well. The only thing I don't know if it necessarily works as well is they're very idiosyncratic, idiosyncratic. I can't think of the word anymore. They're very odd. They're offbeat, British humor. I don't know how well it crosses. And again, a lot of their humor, I think, does work better for board game fans as opposed to broad appeal. And there are others, like I had mentioned earlier, Jeremy, I don't know. I think Draken Strike's new show, I think it has the potential, because again, it couches itself in a format that's very, very different than what everybody else is doing. But I think he is still maybe a little bit dry and talking more. He's talking still to board game geeks, not to my mom. And I think for somebody to have that kind of impact, you have to try to make a video that you think my mom will enjoy, because she'll get swept up in the human experience that they're having. And I think most of us don't really focus in that regard. So most of us, we are targeting board game geeks. But that's okay, because there's millions of us. There's millions of board game geeks out there. Let's see. Then, moving on. I feel so lonely now that Jen has left. Leon asks, personal question, and then if I were to design a board game, what would it be? Or asked differently, you know what? You can go to faq.rahdo.com. There's a link that will answer your question exactly, Leon. And then last up, Alex asks a personal question. Oh my gosh, that's it, folks. We've made it through the game portion of Q&A, and we have still just as many questions, if not more, that are about personal stuff. Oh my gosh, this has taken a long time. I think I need to figure out how long we're at here and decide if we're going to go back to it, because my throat is thrashed. Jen has disappeared. She must have gone out to the chicken. She must have needed some quality chicken time. But I'm going to put you on hold for a second. I'll come back and let you know if we're going to soldier on, because I'm thinking we had so many questions this time. I might have to just cut it off here, and then we maybe do a pickup. Actually, because this would be good. I'm 2 weeks behind on this. If I do another podcast in only 2 weeks, that means there won't have been much time to build up more questions in between. I think that's what... Well, you know what? I'm going to talk to Jen. We'll be back in a sec, everybody. Hold on. Okay, you know what, folks? It is walk o'clock, which is what we call that time in the evening when Dob just won't stop staring at us until we take her out for a walk. So I think we are going to cut it off right here. And fear not, in 2 short weeks, we'll be back and we'll continue this Q&A session along with whatever new questions you might decide to send to questions@rahdo.com and whatever new games I might find. And I'm thinking I need to do a Gen Con preview as well. Not that I'll be going, but I'm sure there are people who would be. And gosh darn it, I should... spend some time talking about that. So, just 2 short weeks, and then I'll be back on a regular schedule too. So, thanks for listening, everybody. Talk to you later. So long. Bye-bye.